Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Wrestlenomics Radio. I am your co-host, Christopher Mookie Ghana Harrington, joined as the crow flies approximately 1,041 miles away, Mr. Brandon Howard Thurston. Brandon, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. I have prevailed as the co-host of this show.
Oh my gosh. Does that mean that you were victorious over Mr. Colin Delaney?
I was, yes.
Oh
I submitted him right in the middle of the ring.
Jeez.
He had to shake my hand because he was defeated.
He had to shake your hand and sign back over all the lucrative Wrestlenomics paychecks that have been held in abeyance during this time.
That's right. I didn't even get a chance to discuss it with him. He got there like just before, I don't know, like an hour before the show started, so we had to talk, and then he had to go right after our match because he had another show more towards Buffalo, so he was wrestling twice that night.
Where was the show that you defeated him on?
Albion, New York, which is about halfway between Buffalo and Rochester.
See, I always pronounce it Albion, but Albion.
Everyone was saying it Albion last night.
Albion. Okay, all right. I'll give it to the locals. But so that's good. I submitted Colin Delaney once using a rowboat.
A rowboat.
Yeah, me and do you know the rowboat move?
No, but I can imagine. Describe though.
Oh, it was like I think you'll see it in the Hillbilly Jim midgets match from WrestleMania, where like the two guys put their feet together and then the other two wrestlers are like flat on their backs, and you grab their legs and you kind of pretend like you're rowing their legs because their feet are kind of feet to feet, and it's an inexplicably painful move.
Yeah,
you see.
It sounds irritating.
Well, each partner has one set of legs, so you see you're pulling them apart at the same time. Okay. Yes, but one time the Olsen twins, Colin Olsen and Jimmy Olsen, submitted to El Generic and El Cimar due to a rowboat in a RCW. So yeah, I have also submitted the man, so I know that he is of weak moral character. So that demonstrates that. But you were successful, and then last weekend you also had a bunch of shows in Canada.
Yeah. Let me see if I can sort through the CTE to remember them. I wrestled in St. Catharines, Ontario, in a tag match with Terrell Kenneth, and that was fine. We lost, but maybe we'll wrestle there again. That was for Crossfire. And then the day before that, where did I wrestle? That was Sunday. And then
I think the day before, maybe you saw Mr. Tony Atlas somewhere?
I saw Tony Atlas in Jamestown, New York. And I wrestled the Adventurer Stone Rockwell, and I also lost. But I cut a scathing promo on him.
Yeah, I heard you riled up the fans.
I did. And Tony Atlas was in the back, and he was holding court. Not like wrestler's court, but like we actually had like a nice locker room because this was a gym at a community college, and he was sitting on one of the benches, and that are surrounded by lockers, and everyone was just gathered around him as he told stories, and I was going in and out, doing other things, and he was telling wrestling stories, and I came back, and he was telling wrestling stories, and I came back, and he was telling wrestling stories, and I came back, and then he was talking about like gun control and Donald Trump and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, all right then. And like no one was like participating with him in the conversation. They were all just feeling very awkward and silent.
Interesting. But I'm glad to hear that you were successful in at least one of your endeavors here. If you had gone on a losing streak, I would have said we might have to retool your diet, your training regimen, whatnot, to get you back up and running. It's been
on May 19th. I'm wrestling Simon Grimm, formerly known as Simon Gotch, for Empire State Wrestling.
Oh my!
It's on One in New York, so looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, that will be a opportunity for you to maybe get some Wrestlenomics content generated, so he can use maybe we can do a silent movie promo for us.
Yes,
but just audio only. So we'll just play a long gap of time and just tell everyone it was Simon Gotch mouthing the words to something. Unfortunately, it's just didn't get captured. Well, that'll be fun. That's a good thing. I spent the week trying to cover the two things that WWE put out this week, or the three things, really, because this was a busy week from a corporate and PR standpoint. Because, number one, they put out the new trending schedules for WWE, which is where they said they were going to reallocate all that corporate and other money, and they would put it into all the different buckets, and then we would be able to relook at it with a little bit new eyes. Then number two, they came out with the Business Partner Summit, which was held WrestleMania weekend, and
which is a big deal for Mookie.
It is a big deal for Mookie. I've been covering it for 3 years here, and 4 years actually. 26. Yeah, 4 years I've been covering this thing.
I noticed in John Cena's comments what I just watched. He said he's
doing it for a decade.
Decades.
Yes, no, for a whole decade.
A decade.
He said,
okay.
A decade. Yeah, so that means. I'm pretty sure I started picking it up when they first started publishing it and like letting people see it. Mm-hmm. But it speaks a lot to the fact that they've been doing it much longer than they've let on. So I was trying to not exactly live tweet, delayed tweet all out.
If they had given you a press pass to be there, they did not.
Oh, I don't think I could have. It was so hard to even like capture it even with a video. And originally the video was just like play forward, no revert, no rewind, no anything. And then later on, I swear they put up a different version where you could actually rewind and whatnot.
Yeah, I was able to rewind, but I didn't.
Yeah,
but
when I first
until a few days ago.
Yeah, when I first started trying to watch it, you couldn't rewind, so it was very tough because it's kind of like you're just barreling forward, and so you have to either pause it a lot to keep up and keep track of what it is and do screen caps, or you just have to be willing to start over at the very beginning of the show every time you screw up or you lost your place.
I'm sure they do this just to mess with you because they know you and I are the only ones who watch this thing.
That's what I feel like sometimes. So I spent a long time taking screen caps of this. I put them into a document. The document is now 232 pages. It's available up at the for Patreons. I actually sent out a special post yesterday. I don't know if you even knew this.
Wow.
Yeah. I did a special post yesterday just for Patreon saying, here's the link to the document, here's the link to the video, here's my 10-second summary of what happened, and you should check it out. And so hopefully someone other I know I inspired at least one or two other Twitter users to go and watch this video, and I saw one or two articles being written about it, so I was very happy to see kind of that ecosystem, as I like to say, getting developed, of saying there's really good information that WWE puts on their corporate site that is intended for, well, actually, they said who it's intended for at one point. They said that their meeting is intended for, quote, investors, licensees, domestic and international media partners, nonprofit organizations, and many more. So I just think it's a valuable tool to actually see what they're positioning themselves as for the year. So I spent a long time tweeting that. And so I think I started on Wednesday, and then I continued on Thursday, or Wednesday night maybe I continued. And then Thursday I came back and did some more. And then it wasn't until yesterday night maybe, or Friday probably. I think Friday night I finally finished it all up. With Triple H and John Cena's section, or maybe it was Saturday morning. I think it was Saturday morning. I woke up early to do it. And so it's one of these things where, like, I have to say it's really slick how they do this thing. I'm always impressed by how much production work goes into kind of the timing of who's going to present what, when, and how. And that was really interesting. So we had the Business Partner Summit came out, and then, of course, the Greatest Royal Rumble, and then all the news and views that kind of went around the Greatest Royal Rumble, the event itself, and then, of course, all the blowback from the event and other comments. And I don't know if your Twitter has been inundated like mine has with new Saudi followers.
Oh, really? No, I don't think so.
Oh, every now and then, yeah. And if you retweet certain things, you'll get some people coming on board who want to make sure that they let you know about how wrong this interpretation is and how this can't possibly be true.
How wrong it is to have women be seen for a moment on your show.
Well, sometimes, yeah. Some about how it's not fair to criticize them for that, for criticizing them for that, and things like that. So it's been an interesting week for Twitter for sure, and it's been one that I think hopefully has a little bit of soul searching for people. There's been I was looking at. I know every now and then I'll get on these kind of Twitter rants, and yesterday was so busy for me because I had it was International Tabletop Day, of course. Oh. So I was finishing up all the tweeting here, and then I had to go play some board games, and so Yeah, I played a little Concept, played a little Resistance, and then we headed back to my house, and we had gone shopping, and so we made avocado lobster toast, knowing that the millennials, we figured they must be onto something, so we should try it out, see what it's like. So we made that, and then we headed over to a big wine party, and we're there till about 1 a.m.
Oh, wow.
With a bonfire and everyone else, and about 30 people showed up. So it was actually probably the first time in a long time I've been to a party, and I was not actually afraid of there like being some kind of I wouldn't say a fight, because this isn't the type of people that fight, but it was 3 or 4 different groups of friends of the host coming together, like her karaoke friends and her improv friends, and then her friends from her life, and then her husband's friends. So it was one of those where you're just like, oh, this could go sour pretty easily. The more alcohol that gets added to this as the night goes on. So I was very happy.
When you visit your wrestling friends, are you afraid that a fight is going to break out?
Well, there's always a fight when the wrestling fans break out, because you're always going to get booted, and
it's at least it's a worked fight, though, isn't it?
It's usually a worked fight. Well, it's a real fight in that we'll throw real barbs at each other, and then it's a worked fight in the sense that you'll get a boot to the stomach and probably pile driven a few times, or someone will reenact the Dan Severn promo or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, that's another thing you forgot to ask Colin about, is that Dan Severn promo from IWA King of the Deathmatch.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, you've just failed on all these accounts here, Brandon, but that's all right. We still love you. So did you watch the whole Business Partner Summit? Since that's the one I want to talk about right now.
I watched the entire Business Partner Summit. I watched the whole thing, yes. I have my own private notes that I've taken.
Did you capture the audio at all, like you promised you would?
I'll do that in post, yeah.
You'll do that in post. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, we're going to play for you the opening of the Business Partner Summit, or at least a snippet of the opening.
I talk to my friends from KFC because the next Colonel Sanders should be me. I ate a Snickers, I know this much is true. When you're hungry, you're not you. You know what I'm saying, Ray, right? When you're hungry, you're just not yourself. But hey, thanks for the commercial. IGN makes the games we play. They know entertainment, that much I'll say. We got Rocket League and Final Fantasy, but on the cover of 2K19 should be me. I mean, come on, look at his face. Am I right? Of course I'm right. Yeah, there we go. So let's walk. Everybody, let's walk. Everybody in the BPS rocks. So right now with Elias, let's walk. Put my songs on YouTube or Snapchat. Topps Cards and Mattel is where it's at. Wear Old Spice if you want to walk with me. We got Mixed Match Challenge on Facebook, reinventing TV. See, I'm an icon here thanks to NBC, but I'm even bigger in India because of our friends at Sony. Pro7 Max brought me to Germany, and get this, China walks with Elias thanks to PPTV. So let's walk. Everybody, let's walk. Everybody at the BPS rocks. So right now with Elias, let's walk. Thank you. You guys are great. Give it up for yourselves. I mean, I'm the one up here playing guitar and singing, but you guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you, Elias.
That was pretty good. Yeah. Frank Sanchez from the Boys and Girl Club. I bet he liked that one a lot.
Yeah. It was like a work of art that was just for Wrestlenomics, I felt. It was, a parody of all these deals that WWE has with all these partners all over the world, and he put it into musical form. It was amazing.
As I've watched this is, like I say, my 4th year of watching this kind of back to back to back to back. And what has really stood out for me is how much the crowd has kind of evolved from being kind of quizzical at the wrestlers that are there to actually like seeing some integration with it and being okay with it. And so I thought the Elias opening was really was intriguing because if you think about it, it was for such a small audience, right?
Yeah.
You got a guy, you're telling him, I want you to do a song here about just our sponsors here. I want you to come out and perform it. And I want you to do the whole gimmick. And it's going to be a segment here. And, whether he wrote it or whether they wrote it, I'm sure it was, they worked together on it. Mm-hmm. But, ProSieben Max brought me to Germany, and get this, China walks with Elias, thanks to PPTV. Yeah. And it's just like, wow, they went all out. And so I knew as soon as this opened and it played, I was like, this is a fun hook, because I know if I tweet this out, people are immediately going to jump on this and be curious about what I'm talking about, versus most of the time it's, just New Day comes out and dances, or Cena comes out and dances, or Triple H comes out and welcomes everybody, or whatever, or George and Michelle come out and welcome everybody. And that's not that exciting. So I loved the fact that they kind of went all in with that for this time. And I got to say, they did go all in. I don't know where they held this summit at. It was obviously a really big room for the size of that stage, plus the fact that they did some big entrances like Bayley's, with actually putting the inflatable tube men up just for Bayley to walk out. Like, I was rather impressed. I don't know about you. Were you?
Yeah, I mean, just with Elias, I think the heel charm of silence your cell phones unless you have a Cricket wireless plan. That by all means do your thing.
You realize that means he's basically foreshadowing the end of the show. Like, it's brilliant if you think about it.
But
it's like a movie.
Cricket Wireless is the only cell phone carrier that WWE has a partnership with, right? They're not partnering with Verizon. AT&T.
Yeah, but then they won the Business Partner of the Year. So I'm saying it's like a movie.
Yes, it's like a movie. So this is our movie review for all our subscribers out there, by the way, right?
Hopefully. It was about 82 minutes long, which is, about the length of a very short theatrical release. And it was all wrestling content, involved wrestling, involved hyperbole, and alternative history.
Yes, it did.
So
we're going to get into that.
I think there's a lot of opportunity to say that this was, in fact, a wrestling movie. So
I think
I'm not saying that we won't watch The Wrestler, but we did not get time to watch The Wrestler yet.
I think the reason, this is my guess, the reason why this interests you so much, and interests me too, but you really go all out and you do this 200-page document. And I think it's illustrative in what happened with the Moolah Battle Royal name, right? In that they don't care about what the fans complain about, but they do care about what the sponsors complain about. So I as I watch this, I see this as the WrestleMania, maybe like the realer WrestleMania. The WrestleMania that happened the next day. This was on Saturday that they did this thing. The WrestleMania that happened on Sunday was for the fans, right? But the WrestleMania that happened on Saturday at the Business Partner Summit, in many ways, that is the bigger deal. It's because
they lay out some strategic, like I was trying to figure out how would I phrase this to someone about what is the point of the Business Partner Summit, and I was like, well, one thing is they review what they said they were going to do last year, and they try to give you results against that. Number two is they set out their strategic objectives for this year, and it's kind of a WrestleMania to WrestleMania business year. 3, they basically pat themselves on the back for things that they did in the last year here that they feel have improved their value to the community or to the sponsors themselves. And then, lastly, there's some kind of showmanship around creating a narrative and then trying to decide what this year's buzzword is going to be. And what do you think this year's buzzword was?
Global localization was one of them.
I would go even easier though. What was the one verb that they made everybody integrate into their speech? It's at the very top of my doc.
Let me look at your doc. Reimagine.
Reimagine. And if you were drinking and listening to the Business Partner Summit, every time they said the word reimagine, reimagining, reimagined, you would take a shot. You would be wasted by the end of this thing.
You need to be hospitalized.
Every single executive that presented, and specifically it was George and Michelle as the co-presidents presented, then Stephanie, then John Brody, who's the head of sales and international, then J.R. Dunlan, who is the other J.R. in the business. His first name is Jayar, J.R., and digital and social media, and then talent recruitment and global localization by Paul Levesque. And so the each one of them was required, and I don't know if you caught this, but if you actually sit there and you're transcribing everything everyone says, you start to notice it, that each one of them was required to have a thesis statement somewhere in their speech that says, we reimagined my business by doing blank, or we are reimagining the business and here is what you'll see. Like every one of them has that as part of their thesis statement. So it's very clear that is where they're going. And it was funny because they actually didn't put a slide up that said reimagine until almost halfway through the document, through the presentation. Yeah. But I noticed early on, even if you just do a search for the word reimagine, you'll see right here under Michelle Wilson, it says the spirit to reimagine is at the very core of who we are. We draw from our past and we reimagine every day across the lines. And then George is like, this is how we reimagine WWE. And then he's like, here's how we reimagine video delivery. And then Michelle will be like, we reimagine content creation. And then it just goes on and on and on. It's 21 times I have it in the document here, and there's probably more than that. J.R. Dunlin, we reimagined our social and digital strategy. The foresight to reimagine is what WWE made WWE the global phenomenon we are today, Triple H said. It just goes on and on. So reimagine is their word.
So this was the 2018 Business Partner Summit, reimagined. It's like the teacher in an English class gave you an assignment. You have to do a 1,000-word essay on how you reimagine something, which I guess is like if you think about a number of their businesses, like the W Network, which they talk about how they disrupted themselves, and Triple H can go on and on about what he's done with NXT and the Performance Center.
But yeah, the idea was that we took each line of our business. This was their thesis was we took each line of our business and we're now setting out a reimagined strategy for it. So WWE Studios, we're reimagining how we're going to do that. The Performance Center, being just in Orlando, we're going to reimagine how that's going to work. The way the WWE Network looks today, we're going to reimagine it as 2.0, but that's not the name. All those things. So it was clear that was the direction that they went with this, which is, it's a fine thesis statement and it's a fine way of doing it, but it's just one of those things where that's why I appreciate it, is that I can see that there's some message control, and I can see that that's going to be the buzzword if we're doing Barrios Bingo or WWE Bingo for the year. Like a couple years ago, it might have been we're way over the top or whatever it was going to be about the network, or disruption, for a while there was our thing. Or, of course, the women's evolution and things like that. But reimagine is a nice, easy verb for them. And, of course, that lends itself to all sorts of different things. So should we go into kind of the different takeaways from the main speeches people gave?
Let's do it.
All right. So it was hosted by Brian Saxon and Renee Young. At one point, she made a Hull and Oates reference, and Byron said, it's an honor to be an Oates to your Hull. And then that's when they used that line, from investors to licensees to domestic and international media partners to nonprofit organizations and to many more, today is our opportunity to demonstrate a clear direction of where the WWE is headed and express our appreciation of your support. And I thought that's probably the easiest way to say succinctly what is the point of the Business Partner Summit, is talk about where we were, talk about what we're going to do for the next year, and then create some kind of back padding. And it's a little bit of us saying thank you to these people. And at the same time, it's us trying to say, look how important and how great we did this year. Mm-hmm. And they mentioned that they want to, their business partner of the year would be, quote, the one that achieved the highest rate of engagement for our collective audiences across multiple lines of business.
What does that mean?
I think it means that you can, and I was thinking a lot about this what kind of businesses get nominated to be part of their business partners of the year? So this year it was 2K Games, the V Foundation, which is associated with Connor's Cure, Cricket Wireless, ProSieben Max, which is a German television partner, and Facebook. Last year is Boys and Girls Club of America, Toys R Us, YouTube, Fox Sports Latin America, Snickers. The year before that, it was NBC Universal, Snickers, Take-Two Interactive, OSN, which is an international media partner in the Middle East, and then Full Sail University. So when you think about it, what they do kind of each year is they have a nonprofit. They have a consumer partner, I'll call it. So someone who helps them sell their product. So, 2K Games obviously is a consumer product. Toys R Us is a much cleaner consumer product. Take-Two Interactive would be what I'll call consumer. Then you have your sponsor of the year. So whoever just gave you a lot of money and maybe did advertising with you, but is not related to wrestling. So Cricket Wireless, Snickers. You have an international media partner. So ProSieben Max or OSN or Fox Sports Latin America. And then you have like a digital partner. And so like YouTube or Facebook were two of the big ones for them. And to a degree, NBC Universal, you could argue, because you could say it's digital and rights or something like that. But the key is that they're not trying to do international partner A versus international partner B. They don't like to, or they don't want to say Toys R Us, but we're also going to put in there, not KB Toys, but Amazon or something. Like we're not trying to put two people in there that we're going to then have them fight against each other. So instead, we're trying to kind of find different niches each time. And so I felt like that's a lot of the gimmick that they use for the Business Partner Summit, is to say, we want to make sure that we speak to these different ideas and these different people, but at the same time, we're not like actually overlapping our strategy. And so each year we want to talk a little bit about a consumer, make sure we have a nonprofit side, whoever was a big sponsor for us, find an international media partner to highlight, and then find something that goes with what we'll call our digital and social strategy.
KB Toys is no longer in business, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's been out of business for quite some time.
Ceased operations 2009.
Yeah, FAO Schwartz or something. Yeah, also
is that FAO
no
Schwartz
good, but
too?
Oh, geez, now we're.
It's my job now to just focus on the subtext of the Business Partner Summit to get you off track in whatever way possible.
See, it was sold. So Toys R Us actually had bought FAO Schwartz at one point, in 2015, and then another group kind of bought it and relaunched it.
To me, FAO Schwartz is just like this big toy store in New York City that's featured in the movie Big.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Anyway.
Yep. So, so the Business Partner Summit. So we had Brian and Renee, and then the opening one was they paired up each of the executives that aren't their own stars with a wrestler. So when Michelle and George came out, of course they didn't come out alone. They came out with Bobby Roode, and so he comes out and he basically just points to them and walks away after he does the entrance. And then Michelle's like, "How's that for an entrance? Thank you, Bobby." And George is like, "I want that robe, though." Michelle's like, "Yeah, me too.
Nobody does it quite like WWE, says Michelle Wilson.
So she had her big line. We draw from the past and we reimagine every day across every line of our business to make sure that we're posed for future success. And then they had these 5 pictures that then flipped over to from old wrestlers to new wrestlers. And I don't know if you caught this or not. The 5 wrestlers that they used as the old and the 5 that they used as the new.
Mm-hmm.
So it was Bruno, Andre, Sean, and Rick. Ric Flair. But the first one, which was the one that was the hardest to see, was Mae Young. And there's only about a half frame where you could see that it was Mae Young. And I couldn't figure out who it was, so I tweeted it out and I said, "Is this Gorgeous George? Is this like Buddy Rogers? Who is this?" And then people were like, "No, that's Mae Young." And then I looked, I was like, "Oh, it is. So it was Mae Young, Bruno Sammartino, Andre the Giant, Shawn Michaels, and Ric Flair." And this was before Bruno died. I'll remind people. And then the 5 that became, Mae Young turned into Ronda Rousey. Bruno Sammartino turned into Roman Reigns. Shawn Michaels turned into John Cena. Ric Flair turned into Charlotte Flair. So all of those, you can make some kind of an argument about why those two are being connected, right?
Naomi.
So Andre the Giant turned into Naomi, which at that point I was just like, I think you're looking to put a diverse woman's face on this slide here.
Well, I guess they don't have any examples in their history of more diversity, do they?
No, I don't think that they have.
Sapphire, maybe.
Yeah. So I was just laughing at that. Whereas like the other ones, Mae Young to Ronda, I get that. Bruno to Roman, you can even make an argument about like what that's supposed to represent, of kind of that like, meat and potatoes, baby face, a tough big guy, ethnic appeal, whatever you want to say. And Shawn Michaels, John Cena would be like, okay, who is a showy guy who's at the top? Maybe Brett might have been another one you could have chosen.
Yeah, but they're on better terms. So.
Yeah, and then Ric Flair to Charlotte Flair, of course, and they're just showing the legacy. But, Andre to Naomi, I had to laugh at when I realized that was what happened. So then they go into the numbers, and, it's $400 million in revenue in 2006, and this year they did $800 million, fourth straight year of record revenue. We're up to $112 million of adjusted OIBDA, up 40%. We surpassed the target we set. There were some interesting verbiage here, which as Smart Brandon, as we call him, figured out and noticed, is that they kept referring to revenues outside the United States, which is different than what they normally refer to in the financial documents, which is
North America, which
North America
means United States and Canada.
Yeah, so from that we can then kind of divide. Smart Brandon was being like, well, if it's 225 total outside of the U.S. and North America is such and such number, then we can divide, subtract one from the other, and we can actually come up with a value for Canada. And I was like, oh, I kind of like that. That it's nice that. Another reason I like these presentations is that they sometimes cut the numbers in a way that's different than what they've shown us in the past.
You got some notification noises just erupting.
No, well, I was trying to search for the word Canada, and instead I'm filled with arguments over the Saudi Arabia show and Babatunde, the big former Vikings player who debuted in the Greatest Royal Rumble, who I pointed out his name anagram to Beauty Beanbags.
This is the guy
among other things.
And went toe to toe with Mark Henry.
Yes.
Who is this?
So
I don't think anyone knew until they went to Google.
I mean, a lot of these names I had looked up one time because I was when you're doing stats for end of the year about who wrestled the most on this or that, you see a lot of these names on NXT and you're like, who are these people? And so you start looking around. So I don't think I would have ever recognized him, but I wasn't surprised by the name. I'm just looking up this. Yes, 2017 revenues. North America was 599.7. If non-US is 225, that implies that you subtract out all the other, the emerging markets and Middle East, which was 125.6, APAC, which is Asia Pacific, 61.6, and Latin America at 14.1. You come out with Canada was 23.7, which would mean Canada was about one. Let's see here. What would be the U.S. number? It would be 599.7 minus 23.7 is about 576. So, 94% of North American revenues were coming from the U.S., which is only 4% from Canada. Is a little bit low, considering you would normally expect it to be almost twice that amount, probably on a population basis, and sometimes even three or four times that amount on a revenue basis. So I'm a little surprised that it's so low for Canada, but it speaks to A, the fact that they signed a 10-year deal with Rogers. B, they've obviously focused so much more on international touring than necessarily Canadian touring. C, it's always going to be if they have a big show in Toronto or not, like a big pay-per-view type thing, is going to make a big, big difference for them. And D, Canada is so geographically big, it's a challenge sometimes to string a series of shows that you can do in a house show loop really easily for them. So there are certain areas that they have to do a lot of flying between. And so I think that keeps them from wanting to overrun Canada the way in the U.S. where there's a little bit easier for them to string it together. And they could just be opening up new markets in Canada. If that really was a priority for them, there is more places. They could be going to Brandon, Manitoba if they really wanted to. But I think just for them, they don't seem to be as focused on Canada anymore. So that's a little surprising to me that 96% is U.S. I would have thought it was a lot different. But anyways, the point that George really wanted us to focus on was not Canada, but his 80-30 number, which we heard referenced on the WWE Network subscriber number call, right? What is 80-30?
Is it 80-30 or 80-20?
80-30.
That is
what he said.
That is in total to 100.
80%. I know, because they're two different measures. One is revenue and one is views.
Views. We're not talking about the number of views that happen outside of the U.S. online?
It is. So he said, what's really exciting with 80% of our WWE video consumed outside the U.S. and only about 30% of our revenue generated outside the U.S. creates a long tail for us. So that's what I meant by 80-30, is that the idea that he's making the argument that because so many people watch the video outside the U.S. but so little revenue is coming from there, over time it will catch up and it will equal out. I don't know if that's true. I still think it's going to be predominantly domestically driven, especially with the TV rights fees being such the big part of it, that it's a little optimistic in my mind to think that just because you get lots of digital views that those equal engagements that will turn into revenue.
As long as the U.S. market or like the U.S. economy is one of the strongest economies in the world, that's going to make your domestic market more dense and heavier than your international markets, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's part of it, is that the buying power is much higher here too.
Like part of the notion there is that eventually these smaller economies are going to emerge and become and have a bigger middle class and become healthier economies.
But you also need that advertising ecosystem, right? Or something to say, okay, you're getting all these eyes from India. Do you have an advertiser who wants to get in front of all those eyes from India? Because, I mean, that's the other challenge, is a lot of times these US-based people are saying, great, you get all this view in another country. They're not going to be buying my products. They're not going to be watching my TV show. They're not engaging with me in that way.
It depends on the economies in those countries.
Yeah. Like if you're Coca-Cola, you'd say there's probably a value of you anywhere in the world. You're getting those eyeballs.
Because Coca-Cola is just a cheaper, more popular product.
Well, and it has a worldwide strategy too. I'm just saying, like, there's some U.S.-based companies that might work with, Cricket Wireless. What's the value of them to get views in India?
Do not have towers in India yet?
I doubt they do. They do.
They should partner with Cricket Wireless to set up some towers in India, and then they'll have a reason to advertise in India.
So George went on. They talked about Michelle gave this whole speech about disruption in the industries, and then she gave this whole Cape Cod Coliseum and the smoky or I guess that it was Vince Stephanie. Or it was I'm sorry, Stephanie, who gave the smoky analogy, right?
Pro wrestling history is totally
it went on.
This thing, we'll get into it.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. It's fun. But they did have that line. So internationally, we're connecting with our fans on a much more local level, reimagining WWE just beyond Raw and SmackDown, but creating great new content in local language and, most importantly, with local personalities, local flavor. We've done this in India. We've done this in the Middle East, most recently Latin America. And so if you were to say what are the key markets for WWE, this presentation here would say we care about India, we care about the Middle East, we care about China, and Latin America has shown up to the game because they've given us some money or they want to do something. But they don't ever say, like, we're really interested in Latin America. We really want to expand there and do things. It always seems like it's a begrudged, like, and Fox Sports Latin America did, in fact, do a localized version of something with us. Or, there is a performance center idea that we have that would probably go to South America.
You were always the big champion of Latin America. At least what aren't they doing enough of in Latin America?
Everything, touring, the development, like, to me, it's like if so much of your domestic, so much of your revenue is domestically driven, and we live in a country that is increasingly becoming diverse and especially increasing a large Hispanic population. And WWE has been poor at recruiting Hispanic stars, promoting Hispanic stars, building it up. And you have Mexico that has a rich, vibrant wrestling culture. It seems to me like you would have a good opportunity to look for stars in these regions and continue to bring them up. And I would say, Andreas Sima Almas, good example, someone that they've done something with, versus a Kalisto or a Sin Cara. I mean, you can see the response that Rey Mysterio got at the Greatest Royal Rumble, which just speaks to how long and lasting some of that effect can be in terms of making a big star and what a big star can be worth to the company.
You think they're snake bitten to some extent by the Sin Cara experience?
That's an interesting question. I think I will say there's no opportunity in Latin America that is nearly the scale of the revenue that Saudi Arabia threw in their face. So it's hard for them to, say, let me go into talent and development, which is a roll the dice scenario, versus let me just take a bunch of money in a certain region and go into the more traditional business lines that Michelle Wilson and George Barrios understand. I think it speaks a lot to the difference between what a business advisor suggests for you to do versus a wrestling savant.
Yes. Yeah.
No, I'm serious. Like there's something to be said about like the more you turn WWE into a business that you're driving by bringing in people that don't know anything about wrestling, but just think that everything's wrestling. So why does it matter? I mean, everything's business. Why does it matter? The less you're going to be able to invest in ideas where someone who's a very cultured wrestling under historian or I say savant just because I mean someone who understands the whole ecosystem, the global pieces, to say, okay, here's what you need to do in order to actually be relevant and connect with people and develop your strategies for the future. And instead, it's like, well, if we get a bunch of Indian stars, we can teach them how to become wrestlers. We'll become big in India.
One of the big themes that I found in the subtext of this presentation is that it's no news story, but like they don't value that. There's a lot of stuff that they say here, which we'll get into later, like in Triple H's talk and in Stephanie's talk, that they think they can just get away with, and maybe they can, because they're talking to people who aren't wrestling people, who don't have a worldly or a historical view of the wrestling industry. And in fact, I think there's a denial that the wrestling industry even really exists besides themselves.
Oh yeah. I mean, that you definitely get that when you start seeing Triple H's talk about how the territories are dead. There's no talent left.
He's going to get it. I'm usually a pro Paul Levesque guy, but he's going to get it for this, man.
I knew you'd get worked up when you saw that. You told me this morning, you're like, I still got 20 minutes left. I was like, make sure you watch all of Paul's presentation. Like, there's like, I don't care if you see Cena and Flair. I mean, except for the fact that they make Charlotte do that terrible scripted part at the end.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? It goes, and as always, we do it with some flair. Woo! You're just like, oh god, that was painful to watch. Anyways, so let me just get to the like core three things that Michelle and George wanted to talk about. But I'm almost there, I promise.
Oh, yeah.
And these concepts, these shows have become a template for us. How we create fresh local content and serve our fans in these countries and put more smiles on their faces. Trademark. We also continue to create ways to introduce kids to the WWE, another strategy that they talked about last year of what are we doing to get to the next generation? What are they doing? ... Launching a new mobile game, Tap Mania. And finally, our WWE superstars continue to represent our brand across pop culture shows such as Disney's Walk the Prank and Nickelodeon's Paradise Run. You'll hear more about the strength of the brand and how we continue to remain relevant from our CBO, Stephanie McMahon. But then they said, and this I felt like, oh my God, they're talking to me. This is my language. They said, we took a long, hard look at WWE Studios' model. And did you when you saw that piece, did you know how excited that would make me?
Go on, tell me.
You don't remember it. I was so excited because I have ranted. You've probably heard me give a few rants about WWE Studios. That's like my favorite, like, this is where they're screwing up thing. So he said, we took a long, hard look. We want to extend the reach beyond just traditional theatrical releases, home entertainment, to include content for linear television, digital platforms, in both short form and long form across every genre, which on the face of it sounds like garbage, right? It's just like, we would like to create content and have it be consumed by people and possibly animals. It's just gibberish words. But what they were trying to get at least, was they were actually going to bring WWE Studios, and this was something we noticed in the P&L reconfiguration, is they really were bringing it into the media segment. And then they said, what are our two examples of what we're doing with WWE Studios? Well, they said The Miz and Mrs. is an example with the reality show that they're going to do on the USA with Miz and Maurice. And then the documentary, the HBO documentary that they did with about Andre the Giant. And what did we learn about Andre the Giant and George Barrios?
Andre the Giant is George Barrios' favorite wrestler, which is a contradiction. See, gotcha. This is the gotcha media here. George Barrios, at a talk, I don't know, a couple of years ago, said that his favorite wrestler currently was Shawn Rollins. That's right, Shawn Rollins. And his favorite wrestler of, past times was Ricky the Steamboat Dragon. And now here he is contradicting himself and totally dismissing Ricky the Steamboat Dragon. And now all of a sudden, just because it's convenient to him, he's saying that Andre the Giant is his favorite wrestler. This is infuriating.
So I think I found. Oh no, I didn't. Dang it! I thought I found it from a Needham talk that he gave, but no, that's not the right
It was
one.
a couple years ago now. And I believe he has uttered Seth Rollins since then, so maybe he has learned his name.
See, I think what happened is that he was going to say Shawn Michaels, and then he switched to Seth Rollins midway through when he realized Shawn Michaels isn't actually a performer anymore or even on television, really. So, but yes, he sounded pretty dumb in that speech a couple years ago. And so I was amused that now Andre the Giant's his favorite, probably because he watched this documentary. He's like, oh, this is great. It's got to be the best guy. Yeah. But I was happy to hear that, this is where WWE Studios is refocusing on, is let's go to spend more time on the kind of projects that are actually going to have some value to us. So, yes, they have theatrical releases, home entertainment, linear television, all genres, but they kind of made it seem like, look, we're still going to do Jetsons Road to WrestleMania. But we're going to have WWE Studios be a lot more about Total Divas, Total Bellas, the Nature Boy ESPN doc. And honestly, that's such a better use of their kind of materials and ideas.
I think they're going to,
in my opinion,
the Marine 4 and stuff like that.
I think there's a possibility. I think that the two projects that it makes it very interesting to see is, you'll notice they said zip about Fighting with My Family, really. And part of that was because Variety reported it got moved to 2019 for launch. I think like February of 2019 or March of 2019. So it's not coming out for a while, and that's why they kind of stopped talking about it. But the other half of that is that I also wonder if we're ever going to see Pandemonium. Remember, that was going to be the Vince McMahon bio.
And we had the script.
And I think WWE Studios, we had a version of a script that allegedly was leaked. I don't know if anyone ever got a copy of the full thing and shared it, in the wider.
Didn't Bix get a lot of it, at least?
A couple people got some pages, and I would love to see more. At the time, everyone was being pretty cagey about it, about not sharing it. And so now it's been so long, I hope maybe someone hears this and says, okay, here it is, Chris. Here you go. And I can be like, yes, I've seen a 200-page doc or not, I just think WWE Studios has been something where even their decisions to go like, okay, we're going to do cartoons and we're going to build it in with WWE, that DVD market is still shrinking a lot. And we're getting to the point where we're not seeing an ROI on it. And I remember the WWE Studios has been at best breaking even lately. And some of the capitalization costs. Oh yeah, it's lost since the beginning of time, it's lost tens of millions of dollars. In the last 5 years, it's probably lost a few $1 million, but it's not been nearly basically when they switched to the model where they said that they would basically help co-produce films as opposed to produce them all themselves. That saved them a ton of money. Then for a while they were just, there's all the time when you have a WWE Studios Google alert set up, you just hear about weird things that they're supposedly working on. Like I remember at one time they signed a deal with like Gene Simmons horror movie studio and just stuff like that, where like it's never clear if this stuff even gets released, but it makes for a good press release. And I'm sure, that's very common in
the movie industry,
that stuff get there. There's a lot of stories and then very little happens. Like here it is in September 2017, Gene Simmons is getting into the movie business. He's going to make this ArcLight Films. They're going to do a remake of The Blob starring Samuel L. Jackson. They just recently did Armed Response with WWE Studios. Let's see if this Wesley Snipes film Armed Response ever came out. Going to IMDb, typing in Armed Response, Wesley Snipes and Anne Heche. It's directed by John Stockwell, and looks like this. Oh yeah, this film had Kobe Lopez in it, better known as Sean Rollins, not Seth Rollins.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he was in that film. So that's a good example of this film came out. It happened. Wesley Snipes. Do you remember anything us talking about the fact that Seth Rollins was in a film?
We talk about it though.
I don't know, but anyone. I don't remember it ever being mentioned on television or anything. This is co-produced by WWE Studios. I can see, if you go to another thing, you'll see like all the projects in development that They're supposedly working on Rideshare, Pandemonium, The Jetsons, Inside Out, The Call, to The Fall Guy, Long Shot, Cold Prey, Gorgeous George. Cruisin' for a Bruisin' is the name of a film that they're supposedly working on.
The Call was the movie that was their most successful movie, I think, right?
Well, that's the thing. It was the most successful movie they worked on.
It wasn't. They didn't do it all by themselves.
Exactly. They only had like a $3 million stake in the movie. So like when it ended up being a really big success, they made some money on it, but they made a portion of the money on it. And so it's been overstated a lot that like people think like, oh, WWE made all that money. No, they made a portion of that money because they were one of many investors. And no, their very most successful movie of all time is probably The Marine.
The first one?
Yeah, the first Marine movie did fantastic for them. However, they lost all that money very quickly with the Steve Austin film and the Kane film. Like the Kane one made more money, I think, in the very end. Yeah, See No Evil, I think, in the very end ended up as one of those where theatrically it didn't do great, but horror movies often do better on DVD.
What day it was released in theaters, though?
Oh, I wish I could. But if I say it, Kane, the room is going to turn red, and Kane's going to come out with the scythe and threaten to Mr. Pogo me. So
it's May 19th.
Yeah, but they very
19th, but that's the day of my next DSW show. May 19th, 2006. There we go.
Well, there you go. You can have Kane. You can use Kane promos to advertise the show
with a hook from behind very soon. So you'll have to do the rest of the show alone, perhaps, but we'll see.
So I was really happy to hear that they were finally kind of rejiggering what they were doing with WWE Studios, because they promised us that it was going to turn around years ago and it didn't. And so I'm glad to see them just kind of beginning to recognize that instead of having kind of one division that does one set of things and then this other division that's WWE Studios, I think they're kind of bringing in the fold. And in some ways you could almost say demoting probably the person who was in charge, because for a while their LA office kind of had its own reign as the WWE Studios office. And I wouldn't be surprised if they've really reorganized it. And maybe that's a factor of George and Michelle kind of moving up in the chain, where, you know, it's easier for them to look at some of these things and say, it is time for us to, quote, reimagine what WWE Studios is for the year 2018, because a DVD distribution model legacy business doesn't make a ton of sense for a lot of
not
content.
Selling it to Netflix or someone like that.
Well, if they had a track record of making good decisions, maybe, but that's my point. Like, because it's the sort of thing where like you can't put your toe in the water on when it comes to this stuff and then expect to be really good at it. And you know what? It still has a not so great rep, right? I think people don't take it very seriously.
You can't argue that. And yeah, it loses money, but it's a good marketing tool for our superstars to get out there in non-wrestling media.
I think that's a way you can argue it, but I will also point out that when I looked at those YouTube views, what was the absolute bottom of the YouTube views besides NXT's talent? It was WWE talent talking about movie projects. Like, so-and-so visits a set of blank. And it was like, those got absolutely the least amount of engagement.
You're saying wrestling fans actually want to see wrestling and not movies?
Well, that's why I'm saying something like Tap Mania, where you're saying, I'm going to introduce kids to WWE by giving them a video game. That's an interesting strategy, but I also wonder always about, like, just because I like to play Zelda doesn't mean I'm going to go watch archery.
Here's an interesting story real quick, too. So last night, I was talking, we just did an ESW show, and after every show, we're trying to make a habit of doing like a 1-hour podcast where we interview one of the wrestlers, and we interviewed a wrestler named Kevin Bennett, which some people might know. He wrestles in Smash Wrestling, and he's pretty good. And so we asked him, so how'd you get into wrestling? And the first thing he said was, all right, I'm going to tell you what it is. Nintendo 64. And he's younger. He's born in like the early 90s, right?
He played No Mercy?
Was his story. And I said, you never watched wrestling before that? Nope. No Mercy was his introduction to pro wrestling. And now he's a pretty good independent wrestler.
So I am immediately proven wrong, as oft I am. So that's good. I think that's great, because I mean, hey, if wrestling games captivate kids the same way like wrestling figures, I've heard a lot of people say, I started playing wrestling figures when I was a kid, and my favorite wrestler was such and such. Why? Well, I had a figure of him. That's why Big John Studd was my favorite. And I'd be like, why is that?
My own experience, I guess, was like, I definitely remember watching wrestling on TV when I was younger, but it was definitely buoyed by action figures. when I was 6 years old.
So I mean, I'm not disrupting the fact that it can be very positive. I don't think it's a negative. I think it's a much better positive than, say, the movies, because the era of caring about seeing a wrestler in another format is dead. Like 10, 15 years ago, it was a big deal when you're like, oh my God, Mick Foley's book is on the New York Times, or oh my God, The Rock is going to make an appearance in The Scorpion King at the end of The Mummy 2. This is going to be crazy, man. And it's like, now it's not, doesn't seem like such a big deal.
But on the other hand, I would say the products that you just mentioned, Mick Foley's first book and Rock's big appearance in The Scorpion King, like these were products that people were excited about in general in the first place.
I'll be clear. Yeah, technically he's in The Mummy 2, and then The Scorpion King is his movie after that.
That's right. Thank you. But like those were popular products, or they were quality products in the first place.
Yes.
Like Mick Foley's book was pretty good, and then especially it was released at a time in 1999 or 2000 when that was a novel thing. That was a new thing to see a wrestler's autobiography.
And that's my point, is that the frivolity and the novelty of seeing wrestlers in non-wrestling context is much lower now. And so I would rather WWE Studios put their efforts towards helping people make movies like the Andre the Giant documentary than putting their efforts towards making that Wesley Snipes film I mentioned. And so to me, it's like one of them, so many people watched that Ric Flair documentary and it interested and affected them. And same with the Andre documentary. Versus
that movie that put out with like Rusev pulling a gun on Dolph Ziggler or whatever it was, right?
I don't know, that one I really do want to see.
You didn't watch that one? I didn't, but I thought you did.
No,
I don't know. See,
I really wanted
we should review that one on a WrestleNomics movie review to come.
Does that excite you more than the wrestler from AWA?
Both of them interest me.
Well, you know what? We're going to get charged. We're going to charge all our wonderful patrons on May 1st, and let's look at the bank account after that and go to Amazon
We'll
or eBay and let's see what's available. And because I would love to watch that film.
Call in a favor to my friend Michael Louisi and see if we can get a stream or something.
But no, I just love the edit. Like, I think I would like to see Rusev in a film. I will say that if it wasn't Seth Rollins, but it was Rusev, I would like to. The Luke Harper film that he just did, Mohawk, I'd love to watch that. But again, these aren't. To me, that's the challenge we're having, is that there's such a big difference between Charlotte Flair and Psych and Andre the Giant documentary. And I wish WWE Studios was like, you know what, we have second to none access to wrestling historians if we want them, and footage. So why don't we go in that direction? And I love that idea. So they said they had 3 goals. This was the big 3. And if I were to say to people, you should watch the Business Partner Summit, they say, why? I'd be like, because here's the 3 things that WWE said they're going to work on in the next 12 to 15 months. And they're actually pretty good about setting a priority and then going after it in these things, because they get dinged hard if they don't. Like, if you want to know what are they going to get paid on, it's probably these 3 priorities. This is probably what the economic strategy framework is going to talk about, really. And it's 3 things. Do you have them in front of you? Do you want to read them off?
In your business partner doc?
It's in all documents. It's in my business partner doc. It's in my the Wrestlenomics overview doc.
These are so vast. You've got to click and...
Or if you just go back to the Wrestlenomics 46 doc.
Distribution strategy number 1. Yes.
Yes, number 1 is distribution strategy, Raw and SmackDown. They have to find a distribution strategy for their long-form content, Raw and SmackDown. We have currently a number of our TV rights renewals on the horizon, making this a critical and unique moment in the history of WWE. We are grateful for our long-term partners such as NBC Universal, Sony, and Sky, and all of our television partners around the world as live content continues to drive value across all our platforms.
Number 2.
That was one they were being cagey on, obviously. They didn't want to focus too deeply on, hey, this is it. I would like to focus on it for a second. What do you think their average value of, say, their 5-year deal is going to work out to be for domestic rights?
I don't I don't know the numbers as well as you. Over $1 million. I don't know. What's the NBC Universal deal worth right now on average for the last 5 years?
I'd say 180.
And and the projections are like 1.6x, 1.7x.
Yeah.
250.
Yeah, I was going to say, so BTIG just upgraded their stock projection. They said 243 was their guess. Last week, you and I went over what the other deals were for JP Morgan and for Needham, if you recall. And those, I'm just pulling up our document from 45. And again, if you're a Patreon, you can always pull these things up yourself and look at them. But a lot of graphs, a lot of Brandon graphs to start this thing off.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. The deal that they mentioned for WWE, gosh, where is the number I want to find? They're guessing they would hit 300 million in total rights this year, and here we go. 270 was the JP Morgan's guess, up from their 255, and Needham's guess was probably a little bit closer to that 260 or 270. I don't think they actually gave us a number per se for domestic number, but yeah. So I bring that up because a lot of people have talked about the Saudi deal, right, and how big the Saudi deal is. But what I want to remind people is, say it was $20 million this year, which that's not an unreasonable guess. Like I thought that was an absurd number, but then I saw the show and I was like, this is a lot of production. They're spending a lot on this. Let's say it was 20 million this year for 10 years.
For context,
that's 200
million would be even more than the biggest pro wrestling gate of all time, WrestleMania 32, which I believe is 17.3 million.
Yeah, so 20 million is a lot of money. That's why so 20 million times 10 years, $200 million. That's a lot of money. However, 1 year of domestic TV rights eclipses that.
Of course.
But I know it's easy to say, of course, but to me, that's a big deal to say, where's their eye on the ball? It's so much more important for them to get this domestic TV rights strategy right than it is for anything else in this company to happen. A 10-year deal isn't even worth 1 year of what they're doing with their domestic TV rights. So they have to nail this down.
Are you saying the Saudi deal is worth $20 million over 10 years, or it was worth?
No. I'm saying even if it was worth $20 million every single year, it would only be worth $200 million in 10 years, and that's equal to less than 1 year of domestic rights.
And we don't know that. That's just a guess, right?
That's the number I've seen bantied around, and I've said that seems high to me. And still, at the same, because some people were like, "Well, isn't that game changing for them to get that?" And I was like, "Well,
not as a company.
Not really.
I mean, it's
not as a company. Like,
but it's not a big change for their business."
Exactly, and that's where I'm just like, I think people don't realize how big their TV deal is and how much volatility there could be in their TV deal, and how important, how tens of millions of dollars can be gained or lost, and how in the 2014 renewal. They lost tens of millions of dollars because of the way they rolled out the WWE network and the way that they treated their partners in that. And that's why the shareholders sued them. Like these are all the things that I think wrestling fans really don't understand oftentimes about WWE business. That's where I'd be like, listen to this thing and see what they want to focus on and see what they want to talk about. So the number one thing is long-term content strategy. And then they mentioned the three markets, NBC Universal, obviously in the US, Sony, which is their India partner, which was not originally their India partner, but they bought the India partner they had, and then Sky. The second of these three areas is what?
Direct to consumer, the W Network 2.0. But don't worry, they'll come up with a better name for their this sounds like they're talking about a tiered W Network, a premium tier.
Yeah, they said, we want to make a WWE network that isn't just about video. It's really the fulcrum, the hub of the entire direct-to-consumer strategy. It's the catalyst, the platform to be able to do it on a large global scale. We want to make it evolve. We're going to make it bigger. We're going to make it better. We're going to offer something for every one of our fans' lifestyles, their viewing habits, and most importantly, their budget, as well as rolling out tiering of the product. This will give us the ultimate control of our platform and our destiny. Now, internally, we're working through this. We're calling it the WWE Network 2.0. And then George goes, don't worry, I promise we'll come out with a better name when we launch it. Michelle, we will. I promise, George. We definitely will. And I joked on Twitter about there's a clip in Arrested Development where they're like, it's Operation Hot Mother. We can come up with a better name than that. And then Ron Howard's like, they didn't. And then it goes on. And I just felt like that was the same thing where this will haunt George and Michelle, that they put up a graphic that said WWE Network 2.0. Because it's one thing just to kind of say it vaguely, but then to actually put a graphic up that says that says a lot to me about, like, you really could not think of anything else to call this. It's pretty far down the line when it's on the actual slide, I guess is what it is.
That's what we're calling it internally.
Yeah, but I just mean, like, it shocks me that, like, I don't think there's anything wrong calling it Network 2.0. Maybe it's a very, like, 1990s way of saying things. So I don't know, the version, maybe it's Matt Hardy version 2. But it's just it was intriguing. So, a lot of people saying to me, what is the new network going to be? What does that mean? And I said, well, the things that I took away from this, do you want to describe maybe what you think this new network experience will be? And then I will share anything that I additionally think deserves to be in there.
I don't think it's going to involve Vince McMahon doing regular interviews in front of a fireplace drinking whiskey like we would like. But I think it's going to be a premium tier, maybe priced around $13.99, $14.99. It will include, most remarkably for me, I think it will include some sort of non-WWE wrestling video like Progress, ICW, maybe Evolve, maybe some others, I don't know. Probably not Ring of Honor, probably not New Japan. And maybe it'll give you deals so that you can get discounts on merchandise and tickets. Maybe there'll be some sort of interactive features where you can interact with other fans and other friends who also subscribe to this tier. Maybe you'll get a vote on the WWE Hall of Fame, which will be canceled out by Vince McMahon's enormous voting power.
His Class B voting Hall of Fame shares.
And yeah, that's what I see. Maybe there'll be a free tier as well, as we've discussed, which will sort of get people, which they always talk about how many people they got watching on YouTube and on Facebook and on the WWE.com platforms. So I think their strategy is to get all those eyeballs closer to the direct-to-consumer platform, which is the WWE Network, to get those people closer to clicking the purchase button on the WWE Network.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think the tier might be a little bit more expensive than you described there.
$14.99 to go higher?
I think it's possible. I think it's really possible. I mean, what I'm going to be really curious about is which shows sit in which part of this, because I will be curious whether or not all pay-per-views will live on the basic tier, or whether WrestleMania or something might get the boot up.
I don't think that'll happen.
Or
I don't think they can touch, and I think they're smart enough to know this, or I think this is their opinion. They can't touch the product that they have now. They can't take stuff out of the bucket. They can't take anything out of the $9.99 bucket. They're going to add stuff. They add it on the premium tier.
I think they could take out, though, the Beast of the East, Roadblock, all that, all the glorified house shows, and move that up. I think they could bring NXT TakeOver. They might move that up.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. I think you'll have customer upheaval.
I could. Well, but I think part of it is you do have to create some kind of you have to put a worm at the end of that hook. You got to put something up there that those hardcores that are going to gripe about it are still going to pay for. And if there's one thing we've learned, it's that there's a segment of that audience that wants to be super served, and you can make them pay more and they'll continue to want it. So I wonder if you put that stuff up there that is the incremental stuff that means nothing to the casual fan, but you put it on for the hardcores, and that will actually drive them up. And I don't think you've positioned it as, hey, if you want to watch the Greatest Royal Rumble, you got to be on this tier. But I do think you position it as, that's what you're doing, and you don't make it a big. You don't tell them, hey, I'm taking it away from you and putting it there. I agree with you. WrestleMania is the real kick in the pants. I do see a version where they do take that painful decision and do it, just because if they want to continue to say WrestleMania is this valuable to us and it's this important, we are demonetizing it by treating it the same as Backlash.
And I think that's the way they should approach it if this was a brand new service, but they've already done this and they've been doing it for 4 years now.
Yeah, so then I think you do it as like, hey, you subscribe to the upper tier, we'll lock in your $9.99 rate for 4 months or 6 months, and you'll get WrestleMania. You know, do one of those kind of things. Like it's a teaser rate. We'll give you WrestleMania at the same old price, but now you've agreed to move up a tier.
You're risking a lot of cancellations or churn, as they say.
Yeah, but I think the difference in what they will be able to incrementally retain, because they have a pretty good data analytics unit, so they can always go back to the people that start canceling and saying, hey, I'll give it back to you for $9.99. I lied about it.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I'm serious. And then B, they have a pretty good data analytics unit, so they probably have some of the churn numbers already worked out to figure out which portion of this audience is not going to, you know, we would rather get one person for a month at $15 or for 3 months at $15 than, you know, 2 months at 10 or something, you know, like just, or for them, they've shown that they don't really care about whether they monetize as long as they can show year over year growth. And the new TV rights deal will subsidize so much of it. But I agree with you. It's a huge risk. And that's where I would say the data powerhouse would be really interesting. And if I didn't, I will say that's something about this where maybe a year ago I would have said, no, you're right, Brandon. I don't think they will take that risk. Where now I'm like, no, they're telling us they want to reimagine everything. I think the idea of let's reimagine what deserves to be on a basic tier would be on the game plan. I really do.
Big risk to let your customers know that you're taking value away from their price point.
Yeah, but I think they'll deal. I think they know that people hold their nose and still push the button and buy.
We'll see.
And the other thing that I think they'll add in, which we didn't talk about here, is A, localization, but B, localized currency, localized payment plans. I don't think it's going to be $9.99 around the world. I think they're going to go to India, and suddenly India is going to cost the equivalent of $2.99 or $1.99 to be a subscriber to the network. Because they've more or less admitted this in the chats, is that they can't continue to use a $9.99 strategy and see growth above 2 million. If they want to break the 2 million subscriber mark, they need to start customizing payments to be in the local market currencies and local market prices that make sense. So it could also be something where the Americans get hosed on WrestleMania, but I'm serious, and the rest of the world doesn't. And Americans and people will be like, oh, they're just going to start setting up VPNs. They won't.
No, they won't. Most people, like, I'm not smart enough to know how to use a VPN. A VPN costs money, I believe. Anyway.
Yeah, and so 100,000 people will, but 800,000 people won't. And that's enough for WWE to say, I will take the hit. So we'll see. They have a really good data analytics unit from what we've heard that they're building. And so that's the kind of stuff you should be pressure testing. And if you are a real organization, you should have that strategy on your back pocket. I'm not saying you execute it, but you should have that strategy explained out to say, what would happen if I did this?
And when they talk about how, hey, look, 75% of our YouTube viewership, for example, is happening outside the U.S. And the reason why, I don't know what the proportion is, but like they have over 1 million domestic W Network subscribers. It's probably something like 75 domestic, 25 international. The reason why there's that disparity, like we talked about earlier, is because of the economic situations in the respective regions. And if you lowered the price point in the international regions to a price point that is more appropriate for each market, then you could even that out. And when we look at these W Network subscriber updates, every quarter or every WrestleMania, whatever it is, I always feel like there's a lot of room for growth here. But as you mentioned, it's $9.99 in a lot of regions. And in a lot of regions, it is different. Like in China, it's already at a lower price point. Not in India, though. And in the UK, it's higher. I believe it's £999. Mm-hmm. And in
£9.99.
£9 99 pence. And,
yeah.
And it's, I think in Ireland, it's like €13.99 or something like that.
Well, it's $9.99 in euros, but that it equals in US currency. No. It's $9.99 in euros, but it's equal to $15-16 US.
I did a table on this. I'll look it up.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that's how it was. Maybe you're right. Maybe it was like $12.99 on euros or something. But anyways, So this is, to me, the big announcement is that they said 12 to 15 months. They mentioned tiering, but they mentioned so much more than tiering. And I think that's the big thing with this is that Dang it.
Yes,
You're right.
Oh, $9.99 in the Middle East via OSN in North Africa. Go on. Sorry.
So then they gave this example about Claire that freaked people out. They did not care for Claire. And this wasn't Claire Lynch. This was Claire from Alaska. She's a big Roman. Yes, I got a lot of tweets about this. A lot of people did not care for this. They're like, what do you mean Claire's a big Roman Reigns fan? No, they're like, Claire's a big Roman Reigns fan. She loves coming to live events. She likes to sit ringside. Right? She's on WWE every day. Yeah, on Sundays when a pay-per-view's on, she's on 4 or 5 hours. And she loves WrestleMania. She doesn't just watch it once. She likes to watch it over and over again. She knows knowing this means we can customize Claire's experience and hopefully put more smiles on her face. And so then in the graphic they did for this, about the 10 million accounts they had, they mentioned all these things that they knew about Claire. And so I'll just quickly blow up the graphic here so I can look at it. So they mentioned they knew, let's see here, I'm pasting it in to MS Paint, my document of choice. So they had the number of items that they bought, how many emails they had, which email she clicked when she bought tickets, how many minutes per day does she watch. Those are all things that made sense to me. But then they had what her median income was, where she used her stuff like that. Yeah. And people were seemed to be very freaked out about her income level and things like that. And as I explained, is in grocery store consulting, we used to have people that would come in and be like, we can take the card data of the people that are using the grocery store stuff and tie it out to other like data sets we built from other consumer things. And then we can figure out things about these people so that we can tell you whether or not they have kids. We can tell you what kind of car they probably own, or, what their income is and things. And people were freaked out by this. And I was just like, no, this is very common in kind of the data analytics community.
Here? 70K?
I think that's what it is. And again, it's not that they actually know her median income. It's not WWE has access to her tax records. It's that she fits a profile that's been built, and then they've been able to. They're probably making a prediction. Maybe they have some information from her credit card that, maybe there's some sort of other trading thing that goes on with it.
Does WWE know what I'm buying besides the W Network with my credit card?
They're trying to tie all that data together. That's the real, like, if you wanted to say what is the point of the hub, it's that they want to have something that says, when I look at your WWE Network's account, I can also tell you what items you bought and which emails you clicked on and what, and look at your cookies on your website and then follow. If anything, that's probably half the way that they're probably tracking what did we think your income is all the cookies that they probably put on your computer to look at stuff.
To be spying on me and my consumer habits.
I think WWE has joined every other major retailer of the world to segment their consumers and try and guess things about them to make them purchase more, which I know you, as a avowed capitalist, anti-socialist, you agree with this mission and you think it's a good thing.
I don't know. Liz, how much money do you think WWE thinks I make per year?
I think that they think as an independent contractor, that's your own business, and it's up to you to figure that out.
So, what were responses to this Claire thing?
Oh, they just wanted to know how could WWE possibly know her income? How could they possibly know this stuff? And so, and the idea that some people see personalization, some people see privacy. That's the short of it, right?
I guess is that unless they're like breaking into my tax returns or something, I don't know. As long as it's just predictions, I don't have a huge issue with it,
I guess. I agree. The third strategic area for them is what they call the opportunity for international growth. We were laser focused on key territories from India to the Middle East to China. We are going to capitalize on those regions with more localized content, more local language, local personalities. I think they said in that other speech that you and I heard them give, didn't they mention something about maybe it was the Needham thing where they talked about supposedly for India they were going to roll out 4 new languages this year.
That sounds familiar. I think they said in this talk too, didn't they?
No, well, that was the thing, is they made a reference as if that was, or maybe that was in the and then
WrestleMania call. I don't know.
You're right. Nope. No, that's in the old. John Brody mentions 4 languages, but that was in his, that's how where we used to be, is that we only did 4 languages. But somebody made a reference that says something like, oh, they're going to be localizing in India in 4 more languages this year. And I thought, that's huge. And then I never actually heard them say that. Now, they do give you the opportunity to go and interview executives at this conference afterwards. So it's very possible that that was just a conversation that happened between the analyst and the WWE separately. But but the big three for WWE this year was 1, content distribution, 2, direct to consumer tiering WWE Network 2.0, 3, strategic area of international growth. International growth is big for them. And when you look at things through that lens, you're like, then it should be much easier for you to say, what are my priorities? And what's interesting is even though Triple H's discussion was very about here's what I want to do with the PC, that's into the context of here's what I want to do with international growth PC. It doesn't fit into the context of like, I need to make the U.S. so much better and stronger and yada, yada, yada.
Right. So how would you do that besides here's the treacherous subject, but improving the creative and then the presentation itself?
Well, you don't have to have one PC in Orlando.
Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't have to be centered in one place in the world, in the U.S. and whatnot. But that's another thing. So then we got a little 2K presentation going down about how great they were a business partner. And then we got Stephanie McMahon. Steph McMahon, what did you think of her part of the
lesson in professional wrestling history?
Did you learn?
I learned a great deal of things that I didn't know ever before, that I didn't even know were true, and I question whether they are true at all.
I did look up the quote because she opened with the imagination is more important than knowledge quote.
Albert Einstein.
Which to me is just like, oh my God. I was like, am I at a high school debate tournament right now?
So what she's telling me there is it's not really, imagination is more important than knowledge. And this is an Albert Einstein quote, allegedly. But so the truth isn't.
Well, I did look it up. He did actually write this in a way that has been verified. The rest of the quote has kind of been misquoted. And so that's like part of it too, is that it very much so, which never happens in wrestling. But.
So the truth isn't as important as what you can imagine or what you want to be true is the way that I will take this out of context. It's the way it can be construed or misconstrued. Stephanie told us that she got into this history lesson about how Vince McMahon reimagined what was known as professional wrestling, she says, and he was able to stand in the back of a smoke-filled armory and reimagine it into becoming, sports entertainment, and where you could go.
Well, now the smoke doesn't come from cigars anymore; it comes from pyrotechnics.
Even though everyone likes to point out to us on places like Twitter and Reddit that they don't do pyro anymore unless they're being paid millions and millions of dollars by the Saudis.
Yeah, I was going to say I hope they watched the Greatest Royal Rumble and then declared it to be the best show ever because they finally got their freaking pyro.
But now instead of just the wrestling events being called wrestling events and happening in smoke-filled armories, now WWE is surrounded by families, and advertisers either had an adverse reaction, she says, to the words professional wrestling, or they didn't understand the term. And this goes to like a thing that I've spent a lot of time thinking about is the way that WWE uses language. And she talks about how they needed some term to explain to advertisers and partners that what they were doing really involved larger than life characters and relatable storylines. So they came up with sports entertainment.
Yes, and then she had this great little piece here, and I felt that this was a good example of something that I always say it's underreported, right? I always accuse the media like they're all out there and they should be talking about this stuff left and right. But there's this line in here, and I just thought, oh, this is rich. And they say today you can see the ripple effect of that phraseology when you look at ESPN, the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network, Justin Timberlake performing at the Super Bowl, Shakira performing at the World Cup, or the advent of infotainment, as news is often called today. And so they have this little graph of 4 things. And so the upper left is Alexa Bliss on ESPN. The upper right is just Justin Timberlake. The lower left is Shakira. And then the lower right is ABC's Good Morning America with Finn and Charlotte, it looks like.
I was
and I was just amused that they slipped in the advent of infotainment, as news is often called today, and like it was done in such a way that I was just like, oh, you're not questioning the fact that like that is highly problematic. That
she utters this, and she says it as if it's a totally benign thing in life, that information is being presented in a way that it's more important that it entertains us than it actually informs us, which I think is a huge problem in the world, and I'm afraid it's going to become an increasingly huge problem in the world. And she just utters it with total amorality about it. Like, oh yeah, it's good that this. I think this goes back to like an ultimate Vince McMahon philosophy that Dave Meltzer described on Wrestling Observer Radio a few years ago. That he describes having this conversation with Vince, and Vince trying to explain to Dave that everything is entertainment. He can reductively break everything down to entertainment. You do entertainment, Dave. Like, what you do when you report news is you're entertaining people. And what Brian Williams is doing is he's just entertaining people. So see, what we do, even if it's not, even if we're stretching the truth or we're lying to people, it's not that bad. Because what everyone does is entertainment. And there's no regard for, like, I don't know, decency or properly informing people, or, I don't know, creating a good culture.
Yeah. Well, the same idea of being like the reductionism on ESPN, to be like ESPN is just about entertainment and sports programming. It's not about, it's not about actually showing sports, and be like, well, I don't know if that's true. Like, I get that you're arguing that the talking head shows are important, but I'd also argue that like showing a basketball game is important to ESPN and at their core values.
And so sports are entertainment because sports are sports.
Yeah.
But when you talk about news,
but like I said, this news line really irked me, and it was one where I was like, I can't believe no one else noticed this. But then I was like, I actually, it's funny because I would transcribe and then I look at the graphics, and so I don't always do them at the same time. So I thought for sure I was going to see a Fox and Friends like little like talking panel as the infotainment, as opposed to like a good one. I know they do, but I was like, oh my gosh, you're touching on this, the whole idea of fake news. You're kind of like brushing up against it here and running away. And so then Stephanie's like, I think of any newsroom you've ever heard of. What's the one story every editor asks? And I was like, what are you talking about? And then part of me was, where did the staff go? What happened here? Why am I being required to write an article about an Instagram post? Like whatever it is, but it was
not subscriber driven.
Yeah. What is the story is what we were supposed to take from that. And so then she's like, WWE's ability to reimagine storytelling is probably our greatest asset. And then her next line here got a lot of people worked up, which was whether it was capturing the all-American fervor of the 80s. So it's Hulk Hogan holding an American flag.
You mean
the spirit of the anti-hero of the 90s, and so it's Steve Austin on top of the beer truck, or the rise of the underdog in the 2000s, and it's Daniel Bryan standing in the corner with his arms up on a yes shirt. Yeah. And so a lot of people got really annoyed at that one because they're just like, how dare you use Daniel Bryan in your story here, when he's a guy that you did everything in your power to not embrace, and for you now to pretend like this was your story. You are reimagining storytelling. You're reimagining history, to put things that way. And, part of me is just like, yes, because they're con men. They're liars. They're professional wrestling promoters. This is what they do. This for you to get upset about this is for you to be upset that rain is wet. Like, that is how it is. And
in this case, you shouldn't be wet.
I guess for me,
it's not that it's surprising.
I've lost my ability.
It's wrong. And just because it's not surprising doesn't mean like it's not worth criticizing.
And what I was amused then is the next thing is that she quotes someone from the Washington Times, where he says, the entire reality television industry born out of the foundation of wrestling, scripted dramatic conflict posing as reality. And so it's the Washington Times, which most people think of, oh, this is the Washington Post, right? Or the New York Times. No, this is the Washington Times. This is the one that Reverend Moon owned. It's as far as I know, it's always been more seen as a right-leaning paper, that is, as far as I am familiar with it as. But I actually went to their office one time when I was at a journalism conference in the 90s.
The way they rounding
when I was in high
journalists and taking them away to a Smith.
No, this was like 97. I want to say I went to something called the Washington Journalism Consortium. And we went. Part of me is like, I now really should look into this company that like ran this thing, because now that I think about where we went and who we saw, I wonder like what other group might have been behind it all. Because we went and met with an editor from the Washington Times, and we also went to the Chinese embassy and met with them. So I'm thinking now back on this and wondering like maybe who might have funded this project. But yeah, so she quotes this thing and just basically being like, maybe we invented reality TV as a whole. However, 10 years ago, we decided to reimagine our content, make the strategic decision, become more family friendly, and grow our multi-general audience and attract more blue chip partners. Get enough of those phrases in one sentence. And so I did appreciate there's a big picture of Animal hitting the ring bell from the Muppets Takeover episode. Looking around the room here today, it's easy to see the strategy work. Our tenacity to grow and reimagine. The WWE brand has never been stronger, which is why our executive team has been empowered to reimagine every line of business and we get a Vince McMahon quote. Did you see the Vince McMahon quote?
Me.
Treat each day like it's your first day on the job, Vince McMahon. And I loved, people really liked that slide, because they put that up on a slide as like, this is a smart Vince McMahon quote. And, people were doing treat each day like it's your first day on the job, dash Vince McMahon, dash Michael Scott. It's just all these other ones like that. And then like I said that to somebody and they go, what the hell does that mean? And they're like, I guess it means that every day you're supposed to reimagine everything you know about like the company and be willing to challenge it. Because she kept talking about this entrepreneurial approach to challenge the status quo every day of the week. But then
generally it's like, well, don't get lazy and think about how excited and determined you are on your first day on a new job, and to bring that every day.
Yes. But it was just very funny where then other people were like, so I should walk into every meeting being like, it's my first day. How am I supposed to know?
Yes.
And then this was, Stephanie's section was a lot of talking, and I don't know if there's a lot of substance to like me being like, this is the thesis of her statement where you should take it away. Like for George and Michelle, I was like, here's the 3 big points they pushed. This next sentence was the one that I thought was the biggest, like what is the brand for WWE, which is today our brand strategy is about positioning WWE alongside Fortune 500 companies, being a part of pop culture, and enhancing and expanding our partnerships.
Is that your takeaway, or did she actually say that?
No, that's a real sentence from her. That is my takeaway of what I would say if you want to boil down Steph's whole speech to one sentence, it's that sentence.
Because I noted here it's about mainstream acceptance and like she talks about how getting more blue chip sponsors, and she talks about how supposedly Vince McMahon reimagined professional wrestling as sports entertainment as something that advertisers and television partners could better understand and accept. Are you ready for a rant though?
Well, let me give my one sentence. I'll let you rant once I'm done. My one sentence is this: if this is their view, positioning WWE alongside Fortune 500 companies, being a part of pop culture, enhancing, expanding partnerships, then from now on, when someone says, well, why were you picking on WWE for that? I would say, is this something you would say about a Fortune 500 company? If a Fortune 500 company was doing this, would you say, okay, that makes sense? Or would you say, that's absurd? Why are they doing that? And if that's what they want, then that's the level of critique that I think we should apply to them. So, when you hear that, hey, by the way, all their main talent is treated like independent contractors, and or hey, they're willing to take hundreds of millions of dollars from and do a propaganda show for somebody
for one of the most autocratic and immoral governments in the world.
And I would just be like, okay, so do other Fortune 500 companies do that, and how do people respond to them, and what is the level of historical accuracy and fact that we apply to those companies? Would we allow them to say, thank you, like from the 30 Rock joke of thank you Exxon for nobly greasing the Gulf of Mexico and allowing and heroically lubricating the water with your oil, that sort of thing, like, or BP, I'm sorry. That sort of idea of like, would we allow them to reposition a situation like that? Or would we say, hey, no, that's a historical inaccuracy. And that's you like doing a revisionist history of what really happened. And so I would just say, if someone says to you, well, it's wrestling, it doesn't matter. I'd be like, but they would like to be treated like this. So we should treat them like this.
It matters.
Which means,
but go on.
I think it does. But my point is, like, I can at least point to a quote from them and be like, it matters because they said this is how they wanted to be treated. So I'm treating them just the same way that people would treat these other companies. Because I think sometimes people are like, well, you have an agenda. You're just searching for something to complain about because you're sour. And I'd be like, no, this is also part about, like, if they want to be treated professionally, then this is the kind of professional scrutiny that they deserve to have.
I don't think there's anything wrong with being sour. People act as if
New Day told me not to be.
Too bad. I'm sorry, New Day, but like people act as if there's nothing to be bitter about or nothing to be sour about, as if there's nothing that they could possibly be doing wrong. That's not to say that lots of people don't watch lots of stuff, including WWE, with a confirmation bias ready to critique stuff. But I don't know. I guess people can debate us if they want to, or debate me or whatever. But are you ready? Okay. So
take it away.
So again, like, what I got from this is that they're talking a lot about, or Stephanie is talking a lot about, how WWE has become more accepted in the mainstream, which I think there's something to, and I think they have made some progress in this. But I think a lot of the reason why WWE has not been accepted in the mainstream, or has had difficulty getting favorable relationships with television partners, is because of the culture around pro wrestling that Vince McMahon is almost completely responsible for. And there's all this talk about how they put smiles on people's faces in her talk here and throughout, in George Barrios' talk and Michelle Wilson's as well. And they put such a focus on how it's so great that they put all these smiles on people's faces, and they're going to use all this data to put even more smiles on people's faces, which is all well and good. But I think they talk about putting smiles on people's faces in lieu of making deeper emotional connections that last and reward their customers over a longer amount of time. And they don't do that because they don't have a great deal of continuity in their creative product. They don't treat their consumers with a great deal of respect, which I would argue that they could treat their consumers, their customers, their fans, whatever you want to call them, with a more respect, while not alienating the less acquainted fans, which I think is always the excuse, is that, oh, we can't do all this for our loyal fans because it's going to alienate and confuse our new fans and our casual fans, which I think is a total cop-out, which we could get into detail at another time. But all I'm asking for is a similar amount of respect be given to their consumers that they give to the business partners that they were talking to at this conference, or at this event. And then, so that's two things. And then the third thing that they could do, I think, to create deeper, longer lasting emotional connection with their fans is just, again, in the creative product, just any sort of well-defined sense of morality, which I don't think, I think you would struggle to find when you watch Raw or SmackDown or any of their pay-per-views. It's a very confused moral world.
Well, you said they have no continuity, and I thought they showed incredible continuity at the Greatest Royal Rumble, because they had those 4 people that won the tryouts, and they immediately reminded them that their 2 favorite things are, jingoism and ethnic stereotypes.
Their favorite thing is the country of Iran.
So I was just, I guess they've been consistent on that for a good 30 years here.
There's just
Russia's been a little funny.
They're just taking a lesson from all their success in the 80s and just reapplying it to modern times in Saudi Arabia, I guess.
I am surprised we have not yet had our North Korean heels.
Mm-hmm. But I'm not done. I think if they did all those things that I just mentioned, just had greater continuity, greater respect for their consumers, and a more well-defined sense of morality, which I think is reflective of the lack of sense of morality that somebody like Vince McMahon has, because he's the head of creative, and I don't think he has he's been a very successful businessman, and I think he's had to sacrifice a lot of morality to do that, and I think that's reflective in his failed creative works, which are profitable nonetheless. And I would argue if they treated their fans with that sort of respect, they would drive a more passionate, more engaged fan base. Particularly the kind of fan base that might have higher incomes and higher education levels, which in other words, that means these are the sort of demographics that would be more valuable to advertisers and partners. Like these are the kind of demographics that would be able to pay more for tickets or pay for a higher price point on the network. I don't know what else I wanted to say here, but because WWE is already increasingly profitable, and Vince McMahon is the CEO and going to be the CEO for the foreseeable future, there's no incentive, as we've discussed many times, there's no incentive for them to change or to try to increase this profitability or increase their consumer goodwill or their cultural value in the countries that their product exists in. And I don't know, because I believe that the job of good art, which inevitably WWE to an extent is creating an entertainment or an art product that's consumed by millions of people around the world. And I think the job of somebody doing that, besides to make ends meet, is to create a good art that connects emotionally and instructs people morally, and it tells like good moral lessons and tells good stories that reflect the way life really works and promotes, I don't know, like good social behavior. But I think what happens is WWE just kind of connects on an emotional level, but it's a relatively shallow emotional level, and it instructs morally almost not at all. And in fact, I think it often, as we just discussed, it instructs negatively. Like when they have, for example, the Davari brothers come out waving an Iranian flag in Saudi Arabia in front of 60,000 people or whatever it is, so they can exercise their xenophobia and their disdain for other groups of people. And all this, and I guess this is where it becomes personal for me, so maybe this is where my bias is, but this becomes personal for me because WWE is that way that I just talked about. Therefore, the pro wrestling industry, which has its trail blazed by the WWE and by Vince McMahon, because Vince McMahon has created a wrestling industry that is like that, he has set the tone for everybody else in the industry. And it's limited in that way, and it's going to be limited for the foreseeable future. And people are going to perceive WWE and pro wrestling as more lowbrow. And I think that's just a reflection of Vince McMahon's taste. It just happens to be more lowbrow and more immature. And this educates the entire worldwide wrestling audience, and it influences and limits all the other companies, whether it's anybody else trying to do business, at least in the United States, or any other countries that don't have a strong pro wrestling presence of their own. I guess the exceptions there would be Mexico and Japan.
You bring up,
just one more point. So, and I think in effect, what happens because of that, because Vince McMahon and WWE create this cultural notion and perception about pro wrestling, it lowers the value on a vast number of levels, whether you're a wrestling company, whether you're a wrestling merchandiser, or whether you're one of these companies that's selling wrestling T-shirts, or whether you're a wrestling news site, whether you're a wrestling writer, it lowers everybody's price point. It lowers the amount of money that everybody is able to make, including WWE itself, even though it's increasingly profitable. And what happens, in effect, is people who make a supplemental income in pro wrestling, it's only a supplemental income instead of being maybe something that's more like a part-time job. And the people who have part-time jobs in wrestling, instead of it being a part-time job, it could be valuable enough to become a full-time job for these people. And the people who already have full-time jobs, well, maybe if wrestling was better, they could have even better and better paying full-time jobs. So I'm done now. For now.
No, well, I mean, for now. Your idea about the value of the company. I mean, in BTIG's latest discussion about WWE stock, they make the calculation, and I haven't checked this to see if it's true because it seems astronomical to me, but they make the calculation that Raw and SmackDown get about 19 cents a viewer hour now, whereas UFC gets about $1.26. And so we're talking almost a tenfold, more like a sixfold, I guess, difference between the two. And you could argue they occupy a somewhat similar space.
I would argue that, okay, I accept that there is some inherent difference between a shoot sport like mixed martial arts and a worked thing, whatever it is, like pro wrestling. But I don't think it's a difference of tenfold.
Yeah, 6 to 10-fold. And so that to me is what was something where I was just like, holy cow, if their calculations are true, I can see why people go. I think the funny thing is, to me, it goes the other way around, where I say that's why I think WWE is going to come in low, as opposed to people who say that's why I think WWE is going to shoot to the top. You know, you can kind of you look at that trending and say, how's the tail going to wag the dog? But I think for people that have that long history, you look at it and you say, well, here's how wrestling has always shot itself in its foot rather than risen to the occasion. It's interesting you talk about the creative expression or the value of the creativity of what they do, because this reminded me of two things. Number one, we actually got through an entire presentation without the words Joseph Campbell being uttered. Or, you know, we're done with the hero in us. Exactly. Last year's story was all about the hero in us and storytelling, and that there's a ring. Everybody knows what happens in a ring. This is a universal language. We're done with that. Now we're reimagining everything. And two, if I really stress myself to say what is the creative vision of WWE in terms of what is the emotional reaction that they're intending to get from the audience and whatnot, the best I can ever come up with from a corporate standpoint of what they've said is put smiles on people's faces. That's about the only thing I can think of where it's been, you know, engagement, super serve, yada, yada. But like smiles is like the closest thing I can think of versus, you know, we aim to tell compelling stories that emotionally change the world, or, you know, that sort of thing. Like, I guess it's funny to me because the one example that exactly the one time that they ever talk about the idea that these creative stories are impacting lives is the idea that like Ronda's going to inspire young female athletes, or Sasha Banks in Abu Dhabi is going to make women feel that they have a life that is hopeful in the Middle East for being an athlete. And so it's funny that like the one example of where they've kind of zoomed in to say, what is it that we've done so well creatively in terms of making social change in the world is the one thing that you could argue they've done the worst on in this past week in terms of what the priorities that they've set for themselves.
And that supposed inspiration that they're giving to other people is only arguable for them because they have only recently started to realize that they can give women an almost similar platform to the platform that they give men in their programming.
Yeah, and I mean, they talk about we got to go to Fortune's Most Powerful Women's Summit, and we got to be at the World Economic Forum in Davos. But, you know, if you watch those things, you see that the thing they love to talk about is how great we are because we're empowering women. Like that's their favorite talking point at these kind of big conferences. And so it's really intriguing, you know, when you really try to pull it back and see that.
I think tone to put smiles on people's faces. Well, if the smile on somebody's face is because they get to jeer, because they're a Saudi citizen who gets to jeer an Iranian person, what good is that?
Well, I mean, maybe that's Larry Flint's message too. So, yeah, there's something to be said about, you know, what is the value you're bringing to the greater society, or, you know, what's the value that the people that perform for you or work for you feel that they're getting out of what they're doing, which, you know, maybe both those organizations think they're getting a lot out of. But were you at all thrown by the bizarre, let's go to kayfabe, let's not go to kayfabe, Stephanie and Triple H sections when they talked about Ronda?
Yes, I think it's just like the sort of disarmament they feel they have to present when they're in front of especially business partners. They can't act like pro wrestling's real in any way. They have to be like, wink, wink, get it? We know it's all fake, and so do you. So you can't criticize us because we're making fun of ourselves, see?
Yeah, so she gives this whole thing about, hey, John Cena was on the Kid Choice Awards, and the New Day was on Tonight Show, and Maurice wrote a blog for People.com. The Rock is one of the highest paid actors. And Ronda Rousey is one of the greatest athletes in the world. The first ever female UFC champion. She was also in Entourage, Furious 7, The Expendables 3. Recently became WWE's newest superstar. And unfortunately for me, my opponent tomorrow night, wish me luck. I could really use it. And then she just goes right back to it. And then Triple H has a similar one where he's like, yeah, she might throw me around in the ring. I think she will a lot. Like it was, I don't know. It's just really weird to me where it's just like, it speaks a lot about in some ways, the damage you do by mixing your professional characters on television and then being business people. it is very hard to take them seriously. It's like, could you imagine if Hulk Hogan was the COO, the chief brand officer or something of a company, and how much you would believe the things that come out of his mouth?
Well, I'd believe Triple H a bit more. Not so much in the talk that he gave in this talk.
Yes, but it was funny because like when they introduced Ronda Rousey for the WrestleMania press conference they did in New York, if you remember, Triple H and Ronda did like the face to face and did like the like, you know, they were pretending like they were upset at each other and kind of walked away. Versus here, they hugged the day before their big match. And then the other part of that was a lot of people were being like, "Why is Nia Jax and Alexa Bliss just sitting next to each other for this press conference? Like you couldn't have just put someone between them."
I guess I see that stuff as like more symbolic of the greater vision or lack of vision that they have about wrestling. And on the other hand, I think we have to accept to like some extent the audience has changed. What the audience knows has changed, and it's not as big of a deal. Like I'm not as unhappy about that stuff as I am about everything else that I just ranted about. And
no, I get that. I actually thought I loved the way that Triple H and Ronda did it at that press conference. I thought like that's great. Just don't have them hug. Like it's the day before your big event. Just don't have them hug. That's the least I can ask for. Is just give everybody here the intention like you care enough about what you're doing to not kind of act like, hey, this is all fake.
Structure, as maybe Wade Keller would say. They're, on the other hand, they're in front of people who are all getting free tickets probably to WrestleMania anyway.
But what surprised me is compared to business partner summits of years past, people were shouting out catchphrases and like seeming like they actually recognized the stars. A couple years ago, New Day came out, and I don't think I've ever seen a group of people so baffled than when New Day's dancing in front of them and gyrating and whatnot. And you're like, oh my God.
What does WWE stand for? Maybe
people shouted it back.
There was a walk of Elias that was audible.
Yeah. And so I felt like, oh my gosh, for once we're actually seeing, you know, kind of like a room of people that vaguely understand what these catchphrases are supposed to be. Yeah. So then, are we done with Stephanie's section?
Yes.
I don't really. Okay, I am too. I have nothing else to say about it. And like I say, I don't feel like it was nearly as newsworthy beyond like the crazy history lesson, which is one where like when I went to go tweet it, I just tweeted, "Oh, this is a doozy," and it's one of those where like. I had to make sure that I had the whole story lined up in my Twitter timeline before I hit send versus like do it piece by piece. Because I knew if I did it piece by piece, people would start responding to every little bit of it, being like, well, how can she say that? What are they doing? Until you'd be like, no, it's all bullshit. Like this is not like a thing where like she made a small mistake. This is like they've gone in on this is their story. And I even had one guy on my Twitter who was like, I was in that Smoky Armory in 1982 at that show. With like, you know, Pat Patterson wrestling, and, you know, it didn't suck. It was great. And I was just like, yeah, I know. So the next section is WWE's head of sales and international, which I think if you went to 100 WWE reporters, you know, people that cover WWE, not just fans, but people that like write about WWE,
wrestling news sites.
Even write about wrestling news sites, even what some might even call themselves journalists, and said, who is the head of international for WWE? I bet you 50% of the people would tell you Triple H. 20% of the people would say either Vince McMahon or George Barrios. And I would be surprised if more than 5% of the people knew John Brody as the head of sales of international. And to be fair, I didn't know it was him until recently when I found out that Ed Wells was gone. But it was one of those where I was like, it's a much more important position than I think people realize. And at the same time, it's a good example of there's a larger executive team at WWE than people realize. And John Brody is one of those people that is a rising star in the company. And he's been given a very important position. But he's a sales guy. And that's one thing that really sticks out when you see his presentation is that he clearly came from a sales background because he's very much about that global sales side of his business, and then head of international kind of seems like something that was tacked on when Ed Wells left.
John Brody.
I don't know if you got that.
WWE. I'm looking it up right now. So
maybe 5 years or so. I want to say. Let's see. He was named a vice president in 2015, and his LinkedIn page. Let's see if it mentions what year he started with the company.
Much faster than mine at the moment.
There you go. His LinkedIn page shows that he started with the company. Yeah, so he's only been with the company for a short period of time here. So and the point being, he started off as a global sales position, coming in from a big position in NFL for a year, and then also working for Major League Baseball, and then some consulting work in between the two. And for the Celtics for many, many years. So he comes from a sports sales background, which is a good, and marketing, and which is a good area to be. The international is very different. That's a very.
Did you know that Michelle Wilson got her MBA from Harvard?
Yes,
I just learned that the other day.
Did you not know that? I was reading some bio of her, and they mentioned it. I think it was maybe that Fortune piece or something, there's a piece on her not too long ago that I remember us talking about.
Digress real quick on Michelle Wilson. Sorry, but there was some problem with Michelle Wilson, and George Barrios. I thought Michelle Wilson came off much better here than George Barrios did. Did you recognize that at all?
I think they came off more as equals. In the past, it's been the Barrios show featuring Michelle Wilson. I thought they both had their speeches down. I thought I don't know if I would say. I think it's interesting because we're seeing more and more. It's about them being co-president, whereas in the past she was marketing and he was finance and strategy, and so in some ways they kind of had unequal territory, and so they finally now feel like they have an equal territory where they both are allowed to talk on the same subjects.
I just thought that George looked more nervous and less like he knew what he was talking about, and Michelle Wilson sounded more natural.
The weird thing was sometimes it was Michelle's turn to say things, and George would just stop and kind of pause and then look at her. And so I think that made it seem extra awkward because the camera was still focused on George doing that, versus almost nobody else had that kind of trade-off weirdness. But it's hard for me to judge. I didn't feel like he was extra un-George-like. I guess he was un-George-like in the sense that he wasn't speaking expertly, off the cuff. Well, he has his catchphrases in Q&A that he uses in the way he puts things up. And here it's clear he was supposed to give a speech with these points and say these words. Yeah. And, this is a tightly scripted show. That's one of the things, with the exception of John Cena. John Cena is the only person who I ever feel comes off as real. Because he even though he says the catchphrases, he always breaks the script in some way, and it's just like, "Hey, everybody, I'm John Cena. Mm-hmm. I know you. Hey, I'm here again. I do this every year." You got he's very real in the sense that he's acknowledging kind of what's happening.
Can you imagine Roman Reigns in a similar role? He's never been brought out on the stage.
Hard to say
one of these yet, has he?
And that's again where I always am like, pay attention to who they put in press releases, who they bring to events, and who they talk about on sales calls. Because after the WrestleMania, they didn't talk about Daniel Bryan, they didn't talk about AJ Styles. They didn't talk about Nakamura, really. They talked about Ronda Rousey, they talked about Daniel Bryan, and they talked about, I think Charlotte Flair got a name drop in there. Maybe Asuka did. But it was just one of those things where it's just like, it says a lot that Roman Reigns was never mentioned, Brock Lesnar was mentioned, but other things are not. It just shocks me sometimes.
Brock Lesnar nor Roman Reigns are mentioned, but anyway.
Yeah. That was it. Yes. Yeah. So it's just one of those things. So yes. The rest of the people I felt were less, John Brody and especially JR, he was very stilted. And he clearly was supposed to say what he was going to say, and then beyond that, he felt uncomfortable kind of speaking. Bailey came out with John Brody, which was funny because they did the whole entrance. They did the inflatable people. They did Bailey in her gear coming out.
Well, not Charlotte, but yeah.
In a half. So it's like her in like a sports bra and like a half shirt,
in a wrestling
it's
gear.
Just like in a wrestling gear, but it's just like everyone else is in business suits. I just always feel weird when they're like, "Hey, can you wear your wrestling gear out here on the stage?" And they hugged, and so I was so amused here that that Brody not only got the Bailey one, but then like she at one point like looks at him and kind of like gives him like, "I'm gonna hug you," and then you can just kind of see that corporate executive mindset be like, oh God, let's do this in a way that will make it seem very professional
Did
without
he stick
it.
his hips out for the hug?
A little bit. You can see it in the doc. But no, what didn't seem like it was unprofessional in any way, but I'm just sure it's awkward. If you show up to work and someone's like, hey, we're going to do an entrance where it starts off with you hugging someone, and be like, okay, that seems weird.
In the WWE?
Yeah. So he says in the 90s, our international sales division was delivered content in 4 languages. And they show a little graph here. And the languages are the American, because it's an American flag, France, Spain, and Germany. And then it says now one of our leading sponsors at the time enlisted Macho Man Randy Savage to urge fans to snap into a Slim Jim for a little excitement. Today we're delivering content in over 25 languages.
Macho Man Randy Savage impression from John Brody, though.
I know. I was hoping for it. And over 50 global sponsors. And so they list the 25 languages here, and I actually forgot to sit here and actually look up all these flags.
Let's see. Portuguese.
But,
is this a Italian flag or a Mexican flag?
I'm sure they do both.
Bulgaria, Canada, the United States, Spain, Germany, France, Israel, India, Italy, Brazil, Croatia, China. What is this? Cambodia, China, Japan.
Turkey is one of them.
Half moon and star. What's the big gold star? Is that like
maybe Malaysia?
Japan, China, South Korea, or don't know what that one is. Something in the Middle East. Australia, Russia. I don't know what the others are. All right.
To which people were like, "Wait a second, are you saying that we do actually, you know what? People thought that was an Australian flag. I bet you that's a New Zealand flag. I bet it's the New Zealand. It is the New Zealand flag.
All of our New Zealand
I think what this
listeners are berating us right now.
Well, the reason I mentioned this is because didn't they say that they were going to do a New Zealand one where they were also going to do it in a local language?
What local language is that?
Maori.
Well, those flags are similar, though. Come on, the Australian flag and the New Zealand flag. It's like a difference between white stars.
But the point is, what? Yeah, but my point is, what language would they be doing Australian in that you need to mention?
Australian, outback dialect. I don't know.
I think it's because I think they're doing actually a WWE in Maori, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, yep. Maori television is broadcasting it, and they just had a thing here. And I just don't know if they actually said that they're going to do it in the language at all. It seems like they're going to, in both English and, I can't say the language, Te Reo Maori. So yes, that's what it is. It's not Australian. And same thing with Canada. People were like, what do you mean you're broadcasting Canadian? And I was like, well, I think they have a French-Canadian broadcast team. That's separate. So they do, in fact, have a separate commentary team just for French Canada, for Quebec.
Spoken by the Maori people, the indigenous people of New Zealand. Okay.
Yeah. So I know people were quick to criticize WWE for having a flag that listed Canada, and at the time someone said Australia, but now I realize it's New Zealand. But they are, in fact, other languages that they are doing.
French flag here too. So don't you think that there's in the same team?
Yeah, there's a separate
French Canadian team and a French team.
Yeah, I think one of the Rougeaus does
and
like the French Canadian team
just for France team.
France, okay. Yeah, because a lot of times the commentary is being done by the TV partner. And so also then the TV partner is going to have their own version. Plus, some of these shows are edited down to an hour or 2 hours, And so you're not always
really saying here. So 25 languages for what? All their programming, like all the Raw and SmackDown program, or just the pay-per-views where we see the roll through that they do every pay-per-view for all the teams that they have there.
My gut is they're actually saying that they produce programming in all 25 of these languages in some way, and things like. If they're doing Raw and SmackDown and Maori, they're probably doing it in all these other languages. It's again, a lot of it is done by the TV partner themselves, not WWE necessarily. So there's a partnership there, but it's the person works for ProSieben Max. They don't work for WWE, that sort of thing. So it's more complicated. And this is where we actually got the WWE Reimagined slide finally. And then, then he starts talking about international stuff, and they show, you know, a picture of Cardiff, Wales, and then I loved this picture they had of Tokyo, Japan. Did you see this one with these two women holding Akira Tozawa
I see.
Posters? And then right in the middle, it just says "too easy."
Is the real flag that they made themselves, or they were handed it by someone?
I think that Akira Tozawa is a man, a god among men, and clearly the women here recognize that, and so I loved that. Then he talked about, you know, kind of where they have all their international offices. So WWE has an international office in Mexico City, Munich, London, Dubai, Mumbai, Singapore, Shanghai, and Japan. So very, you know, in all of North America, you have basically some offices in the U.S. You might have a Canadian office. I don't even know if there is one really. Right. And then Mexico City. There used to be, but they really did like consolidate after a while, because the one of the reasons they had all these old offices is so that they could do global sales kind of separately. And especially when WWE's TV deals basically stopped including the advertising on the television program, you know, like the actual ads, then they didn't really need all these offices in many ways. And so it was seen, I think, very much as a cost-cutting measure to kind of like get all the international teams back in order, and also to close down some of these, you know, hubs that weren't making a lot of sense. So, you know, they talk about 180 markets and 800 million households that they can supposedly reach. That, you know, they're committed to building their scale, and they want to have a localization strategy. And so they talked a little bit about, you know, what they're doing for Fox Sports in Latin America. And then you see, you know, pictures of different people, and especially in India, all the work they've done on localization there, which India is okay with Sami Zayn coming. He's posed in their picture. Actually, there's an OSN thing here. So this is from the Middle East, is a Sami Zayn thing. So he must be from one of the other Gulf states. They were more comfortable with Sami Zayn being there.
That's not what you're saying, is it?
Well, he's Canadian.
Right, he's
Canadian.
Descent.
His family has some Syrian background, and he was not on the Saudi Arabia show. And the implication obliquely from the quote from Dave Meltzer when he asked why is he not on the show is WWE said, "We are committed to embracing individuals from all backgrounds while respecting local customs and cultural differences around the world," which to me sounds a hell of a lot like Sami Zayn was not going to be welcomed to be on the show. That in itself is a big question mark, because I was shocked that they did that angle with the Iranians, where I just thought, this is, you know, you want to talk about people that you'd think that would the Saudi Arabians would be like, nope, we're not comfortable with that. It would be, you know, the guys that have an Iranian background or are carrying an Iranian flag. I'm sure the WWE obviously cleared the whole thing well in advance, but it's just interesting. He talks a little bit about his TV deals that he's done, which I think speaks a lot to. They kind of have the domestic deals, the UK deal, the India deal, and then they have everything else. And so usually they'll let like the international guy talk about the everything else deal. So he talks about, you know, well, on Australia, we got a 9. In France, we're in L'Equipe. Japan is DAZN. New Zealand is a Sky deal. South Korea had an IB Sports deal. And then they make a big deal about Super Sport, the sub-Saharan deal that they did, which is mainly for South Africa, but also for some other sub-Saharan countries. And so they think it's a great deal, which is interesting because that's very much in contrast to what, you know, one of the reporters from South Africa was telling me about what they thought of the deal. So it's possible it just has better, you know, coverage on other countries in South Africa through satellite. But I thought that was really interesting how they made, you know, the Super Sport deal sound like a big deal when it, you know, in some ways you could argue it was actually a downgrade for them. PPTV, of course, they talk about China. ProSieben and Max, they really go deep in. They even mentioned that they're going to work on a family-friendly highlight show to air every week. And then they talk about, you know, we do international sponsorships. So Anheuser-Busch and Cooper Tires and Warner Brothers and Hardee's and Pepsi. And I kept thinking Hardee's. Hardee's seems like such a weird one to me.
It's
like,
food.
Is Hardee's I know, but is it a big deal in other countries in the world? Like, Hardee's doesn't have a great rep in the U.S., so it just seems like one of those weird ones that it's like, what international countries are like, oh, God, I want that Hardee's now. International Hardee's appears to be a lot in Pakistan and the Middle East.
Anheuser-Busch, though, is a beer sponsor that they usually I mean, there's never been a beer sponsor into WWE that I can remember.
But the thing is, I swear they had the same. Like, I'd have to go look at the 2017. I swear that in 2017 they said the same thing.
I mean, like, I guess what I'm saying is that in the U.S. they don't.
Yeah, I know. That's what I thought was so interesting. Where I was just like, they have such a different set of. The same with Pepsi. Like, Pepsi's a huge, one, but it's one of those where you wonder, like, are they talking that they got Pepsi Costa Rica or something? And, you can put Pepsi's logo up there, but it's not like PepsiCo, the company, is really investing heavily in doing a partnership. They refer to it only as a regional marketing partnership. I guess I could say here, WWE, Pepsi, and see what comes up. Not a lot of very CM Punk promos. A lot of CM Punk promos. Just not gonna. And then some John Cena Rise Above. UK Business Insider. Let's see here. Oh, no, it's about taxing soda. Yeah. I don't know what the Pepsi deal was. I would love to see. This is the kind of stuff that I love going into a rat hole on, is being like, what did they do with Cooper Tires? Tell me more about that deal. And I just know, like, no one else cares. But to me, I'm like, what do they do there? What's happening? I'm curious. And so they talk a little bit about, we're doing some stores in the UK and Germany and Spain. And then they show some pictures of, Natty in Japan and Finn in London and The Miz in Beckton, UK, which I was amused that they referred to it as London, England, and then they referred to it as Beckton, UK to make it seem like it's another country of the world. Then a big show in Abu Dhabi. And then they do their one-stop marketing solution where they're just like, look, you can do everything with us. We deliver the talent, we produce the creative, we collaborate with our broadcast partners, and we get media impressions across the world. And you know what? There's a huge value to this, and you'll be really happy to see it, just like Snickers was, just like KFC was, and the brand awareness will go through the roof, and it's great. But when you listen to this over and over and over again, you don't walk away thinking, this guy's the head of international. Look how he detailed for me the strategy of what he's doing in all these countries of the world. You're like, this guy likes to sell things in global partnerships with people. And, here he also has the title international. Like, I don't know about you, but that was my impression from this part of the speech, is that he's a sales guy who has the title international right now. But everyone else talked a lot more about actual international strategy, in my opinion. Would you agree?
I don't know. I don't get this stuff as much as you do. You're the international expert.
I know, but you like tuned it out, right? Like, because it was just like sales jargon. Like, that was my point, is that it wasn't like he said anything interesting about an international marketplace that you're like, oh yeah, that is true. That's happening in China, or that's happening in India.
Take much away from this.
Yeah. So that one was a little bit of a bust to me, because I really thought we'd actually hear him say, well, we recognize that in Mexico, GDP has gone up by this percentage, and it's important for us to make sure that because of the changing demographics in the Middle East, where 40% of the people are under the age of this, we need to capture that, that sort of stuff, where you're like, oh, that's international strategy. Here, this is payday candy bars and us work together on something. And it's like, okay, that's cool, but that doesn't excite me, especially as a U.S. based company.
It's job to sell these partnerships internationally.
It is one half of his job.
What's the other half?
But he's international. His title is well, let's go back to his title. What was it on that LinkedIn page? Pull it up. He's the executive vice president of global sales and head of international. So those are two separate jobs. Executive vice president, global sales, head of international. So I would argue there's a big head of international piece of there that I felt was very understated. So that's just me. And again, I would say the biggest thing that he mentioned here on an international basis was talking about those tertiary markets that they signed big deals in. South Korea, Australia, so forth. The question I would have is that they announced that big partnership that they did with the sports marketing company around the world. And I would be curious to hear more about that. Like, where does that fit into what they're doing for TV rights renegotiations and whatnot? Because that was a big deal to them when they said that they were signing with this, international sports marketing company to help them kind of improve. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Are you looking at me
I'm
with?
I'm looking at the American flag right now.
You're looking at the American flag. That's right. Let's talk about J.R. Dunlin. J.R. Dunlin is digital and social media EVP, executive vice president. Didn't find him to be a great speaker, to be honest. I was very underwhelmed by him. And we saw him last year, too, and he underwhelmed me. And so this is kind of 2 years in a row. I know I'm kind of giving my inside baseball here of Mookie's impressions of WWE executives. But I thought George and Michelle seemed so much better by the end of this when I saw the lack of charisma in the other presenters. I'm putting Paul and Stephanie in a very different category. But like, it was just like one of those where you're like, oh, John Brody is not that captivating, and JR is even less captivating compared to like George and Stephanie, who really get it in a lot of different ways.
New Day that loosened him up, didn't you think?
I don't know if they got to dance. I think it was more of a he had to dance. So New Day comes out, and it's clear New Day has made a goal that they're going to twerk at any appearance that they get sent on, regardless of the appropriateness of it. So I think they did the same thing at like the WrestleMania press conference where they threw pancakes at people. Here, Kofi came out and twerked. And then Xavier Woods informed us that there's actually a new executive position I was unaware of. Did you catch what position that was?
I don't remember.
He's the EVP of Bootios, trombones, and all things having to do with pancakes.
Does that mean he's an employee now? Does he get benefits?
That's what I was trying to figure out. I was like, wow, that's a big step for Xavier Woods here.
His travel expenses are going to be paid, and he's going to get health insurance and life insurance and a 401k.
Well, not only that, they introduced a man who is more than the Mozart of digital social content, but he became an honorary member of New Day. So I don't know whether that means I should go edit the Wikipedia page and put a reference.
He should. He probably doesn't have a Wikipedia page, though, does he?
No, but I'm saying the New Day Wikipedia page. I'm sure I could add in that J.R. Dunlin, parentheses, honorary, put a link back to that thing there. Do you think that would stay on the Wikipedia page for very long?
It would be interesting.
Maybe I'll make a bootleg T-shirt where it's just the four of them and it just says New Day. And then, as is explained, that because he's an honorary part of New Day, they have to see those hips.
Or if you don't,
and so
should.
Make that T-shirt.
And edit the Wikipedia page.
Edit. I would love that so much. That's like sometimes when I'm looking at like old wrestling results and I'm trying to then like decipher it into who's in this faction, you know, and it'll be something like the Freebirds, and sometimes I'll be like, well, I want to make sure it was Midnight Express is a good example because Midnight Express had more than one, iteration. And so I'll be like, who's the Midnight Express? And then, of course, what I'm really looking for is the main, Midnight Express version so that I can look to see, okay, which version. Yeah, well, or just like for that year, who was that? Same with the Fabulous Kangaroos is another one where, they changed over time. That there's the famous Fabulous Kangaroos, but then like one guy would stay on for years and years. And so it's like when you go to the Midnight Express, it says like former members, Randy Rose, Jack Victory, Norville Austin, Bombastic Bob, Bodacious Bart, Ricky Nelson, Stan Lane, Dennis Cordry, and Bobby Eaton. And I'll be like, I'm really looking for Stan Lane, Dennis Cordry, and Bobby Eaton. Condry, sorry. And then maybe Randy Rose. Like you can make arguments of that. Like that's what I care about. But it's like you go to the Wikipedia page and they're of course listing all that. And then sometimes you even get to the ones where it's like the indie guys that have been inducted into groups. And you're like, oh my God, this is awful. Like if I do Freebirds, I guess maybe not Freebirds. One of the other ones, there was just like I just remember every time I looked it up, it was all the indie guys that have taken over the gimmick since then. And you're like, this has nothing to do with what anyone is ever. No one is ever Googling it, trying to see which two indie guys are doing this gimmick today.
Doink?
Yeah, Doink or just so forth. And so New Day. We should edit the New Day page to make sure. Let's see here, New Day Wrestling, professional stable formed in 2014
right now on the air.
No, I'm not going to do it at all. Get myself banned from Wikipedia, probably be considered there was. Did you catch the joke in the Greatest Royal Rumble when Francesca showed up? That they were unsure whether Francesca would be allowed to perform in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, but did they say that on commentary?
They said it very vaguely. Yeah, yeah.
Corey
I think
did, Corey came out with. I don't know if
Yeah.
we're jumping ahead. We're eventually going to talk about Greatest Royal Rumble, but Corey put out an Instagram post saying something like, but we think we have it so bad here sometimes, but when you go to another country, sometimes you realize, basically saying that it's really unfortunate that they don't want to accept women or let women wrestle on the show, and at least in the United States we have that, and we have freedom of speech.
Yeah, yeah. As a drink to remember that no matter how bad we think we all have it, at least our women have rights and we all have freedom of expression. Yeah, is what he posted. Yeah. So, yeah. So let's go back to JR now that I got distracted here. So once JR got his presentation started, he talked about we always had the vision to reimagine content across mediums, because he was talking about, you used to only be able to get what you experience at an event, word of mouth and print magazines, those dang dirt sheets that were the only way to get information there. But they were, or PWI. But yeah, I just thought it was funny that in a way you could say it was an argument against, that all these rumor miring that happened. The dirt sheet was the worst of those three. What experience at an event, word of mouth plus a magazine. We recognize the importance of moving beyond traditional platforms to become a trailblazer in this area. And so we want to have 24/7 engaged fans. And that's why I came up with something called Facebook Watch and WWE and Mixed Match Challenge. And so he goes into the story about that. And, it was interesting because he does say, like, here, those discussions we talk about, which he said, we want to, quote, extend our time spent with video content on the platform. And then they said, what could we do? Well, we could do shoulder programming. We could do simulcast our content. We could test tertiary markets. And that goes to, wasn't there a discussion about, wasn't there some sort of marketplace where Raw or SmackDown was being shown on YouTube or whatnot that we found out? Like it was like Romania or something. Someone came back to us.
Yeah, that was mentioned.
Yeah. Or shoulder programming is kind of what we would call like a pre-show or a post-show. So the kickoff or the wrap-up shows, talking smack type sort of thing. Simulcast is obviously, both at the same time, or tertiary markets, like we say, choosing another marketplace to like really put the content out there. And then they came up with Mixed Match Challenge from that. And so it's just him saying it's our template for future of our content living on new platforms, interactivity and super serving our fans when they want, where they want, on the device that they want. And he goes through the three trends for what's happening in digital world today. And so his three trends are, one, that video consumption is on digital platforms, and supposedly he had a sentence that he didn't finish. He goes, in fact, 2017 was the first year that there was more advertising went towards digital. And you want to say, then what? Like, what are you saying versus
traditional TV?
Traditional TV, like, or media, or print media, or like, what are you saying? It went more than what?
For WWE, like, what for the economy in general?
He was talking about these as major trends, so I think he meant in the economy in general. Yeah, so he made that claim. Then he said, second, our next generation is the fans. Brands have to lean in to have an opportunity to future-proof their audience by meeting millennials and Gen Z on the platforms of their choice, which you can only imagine the eye roll emoji that would be posted if I said that to someone. I'm leaning in to future-proof my audience by meeting you, a millennial and Gen Z person, on a platform of your choice.
That's what we're doing here too.
And then I literally leaned in to say that. The third one was a quote from Mary Meeker saying that video games and esports are huge. So it's pretty clear that JR has staked out his strategy on these three things. That, what he needs to be is all about digital, because that's where the advertising dollars are going. 2, I got to be ready for where millennials and Gen Z do stuff. I got to make sure that I'm there. And 3, video games and esports. And I've given my WWE Studios style rants about, my confusion on esports. And I've grown to embrace Twitch a little bit. I actually do pull up my Twitch stream sometime. I do watch Twitch stuff sometimes. So I will admit that I've come around a little bit on Twitch. But I still feel like esports, there's a little bit of a challenge for me sometimes about, does people
who like to watch people play wrestling video games mean that will make them bigger wrestling fans. That's where you get really weird to me. And then for them to be like, look, League of Legends is really popular, so therefore
maybe there'll be some people who are just into that itself. But if nothing else, it's a good exposure for your product, wrestling product in general.
But I'll tell you when we talk about like what exposure can you get, there's those videos on Up Up Down Down where Xavier hosts a bunch of guys and has them play video games, and some of them are incredibly endearing because you see a version of the wrestlers that is so much more authentic to who they are, and
so much more compromised.
I'll be really clear
itself, but go ahead.
Well, I'll be honest. So like Luke Harper, they have one where he's lost now like 4 episodes in a row, and so it's him, Connor Tozawa, and I think Apollo Crews playing a game, and Luke Harper finally starts winning, and just the way he acts there is the most authentic I've ever seen him act on television, where I'd be like, that's the person that I used to know. Like that he's acting in that way. And it's funny because like there's other guys in the background like Fandango just walking around with a t-shirt trying to plug it. And it's kind of hilarious and endearing. And so I will agree that there's a joy to it, but I don't know if it's about the fact they're playing video games. To me, it's more about the fact that like we're actually seeing authentic content from wrestlers rather than something that feels so inauthentic. And then he goes into this whole thing about, they do YouTube stars are bigger to US teens than other people. And so therefore we're connecting with social influencers like Lily Singh and Inara Sarkis and the Twin Toys. And we're going to get Ryan Blaney and Greg Olson to play NASCAR and Madden with us and things like that. So that's their digital strategy. They're talking about we're bringing in new talent and cultivating a following around them. WWE's Now's Kathy Kelly is a great example and a unique talent in that she debuted in the digital world and she hosts our most popular digital and social show. I don't know what other digital and social shows they have that she's competing against, but
Up Down Down for
I will
one,
say,
I guess.
Yeah, I don't even know that. Like they get 1 million plus people subscribing to Up Up Down Down. I doubt that many people are watching WWE now as subscribers. But I will say she is a talent. She's very good at kind of her what she's creating content around. It's just one of these weird ones where I don't know. I don't get great confidence from JR's speech here that like they know what they're doing in a way that makes me think, yeah, they're at the forefront. A lot of it to me feels like if you handed a 50-year-old man and said, hey, what's our social and digital strategy? You'd be like, I'm gonna bing a couple articles about that and I'll get back to you in the morning and be like, well, in 2013, here's what people told
BTIG
me.
Enjoyed this presentation though?
I think they loved this part. And JR is not a 50-year-old man. I should make that clear. Like I speak to this as if it's a 50-year-old man saying, hey, here's an article I read about patterns in future society. And I'm not saying this should be one of these where we're like, we're going to hire an 18-year-old kid to be in charge of our digital strategy. But it just sometimes I just don't get great confidence from this. And maybe that's just my fundamental disconnect with WWE's digital strategy, that to me it doesn't resonate very true.
You did like my Instagram post this morning, though.
I did because it was you dressed up like LOD when you're like 7 years old.
I think you're just
amazing.
Really kind of waking up, though.
I was curious, but no, I saw that picture. I was like, holy crap. And then but it's like him just being like, here's the Staples Center packed with esports fans for League of Legends. And part of me is just like, that's like me saying, here's a turkey sandwich that looks vaguely like Che Guevara. And you'd be like, what? And I'd be like, exactly. You're just showing me a picture of something else and trying to be like, this is what I do.
Timberlake performing at the Super Bowl is sports entertainment. Don't you see?
Yeah. So, yeah. And so is Good Morning America. So they talk about we're going to do Next VR. We're going to do, your Bitmoji can do something on Snapchat, which is a sentence I think a year ago I would have even understood. And then this Little Star thing about you can bring they said we create an opportunity to bring a real AJ Styles or Shinsuke Nakamura into your world via AR through our partnerships with Microsoft and Little Star. And I'd argue that is not a real AJ Styles. A real AJ Styles has body, flesh, blood. That is a virtual AJ Styles or a virtual Shinsuke Nakamura. You cannot kick a virtual AJ Styles in the balls. And so I don't think you'll get the real AJ or you get the real Shinsuke Nakamura at your house unless that's an option. So, but he did mention this content innovation lab, and you're a young, hip a guy. Can you explain to me what a content innovation lab is?
No, I can't. I'm not that young.
I listened to him explain this 5-6 times, and I was like, I don't understand what he's talking about, because he kept saying content innovation lab. We're starting it up in the PC Performance Center. It's going to have live, mobile, social, virtual, augmented realities. If you're a fan, this is cool, but it's just an extension of our business. It is the next wave for the WWE to continue the conversation 24/7 across this living network. And part of me is just like, yeah, but what you showed me for Content Innovation Lab was a green screen with two women standing in front of it.
And what's her name?
I think it's the maybe the Army girl or the pinup.
What's her name?
Yeah. I don't remember. She's from the Mae Young Classic.
Evans. Lacey Evans. Yes.
Lacey Evans? Okay, yeah. So it's the two of them like facing off in front of each other. But yeah, I don't know if there's any clarity about what a content innovation lab is. So
3D and 360 and virtual reality. I don't know.
So they said they're launching this at the PC, but in fact, actually, there's a job that just got posted on April 20th. Maybe this will tell us something. Let's look this up. They're seeking an enthusiastic, detail-oriented director of content innovation lab. If you're self-sufficient, motivated, capable of performing under tight deadlines, and looks for solutions and unique outside the box. Okay, you're going to oversee the day-to-day operations. You have to go to Orlando. So this is going to be done out of Orlando. You have to manage producers and a team on projects. You have to create content with an emphasis on innovation, emerging technologies, and platform specific. Develop them to become self-efficient content creators. So I guess teach them how to shoot their own videos. Initiate and create new digital video concepts for live consumption. Develop financially responsible solutions and processes for shooting live and live-to-tape in-ring content. Collaborate with key social and pop culture influencers to broaden scope and awareness of WWE's Performance Center, Innovation Lab, WWE associated brands, and responsible for developing compelling video elements that could potentially complement WWE storylines and characters using the newest technologies. So my takeaway from this is basically this person would be doing things like they would maybe bring a social media influencer down to the PC and then, help them shoot promos. And then they would probably do some in-ring segment and then they'd work with somebody else,
some
kind of like
stars and create crossover mainstream content.
Or like kind of like when that one guy from like Ridiculous did like a tag team match or, that kind of stuff. Like, all right. Well, there's a job there. It was posted on April 20th.
Orlando. You going to apply?
I am not. I don't think I could think of a worse. I don't think I could think of a WWE job that I would be worse at than managing the social media content. Because the only thing I've done that is good about my actual social media is me basically reporting about WWE in oftentimes the most boring way I can think of.
You've become an influencer.
Here's a court document.
You're an influencer in wrestling media, though.
I'm an influencer, but they're looking for a different kind of influencer. They're looking for the kind that is popular for being popular. They want the Logan Pauls or the people that aren't Logan Paul but could be, that sort of thing. I was really excited in this next section on Facebook where I was able to get a screenshot of the Happy Rusev Day picture of Rusev in front of a computer, because I searched and searched and searched for like the words Rusev laptop, Rusev mixed match challenge the other day, and I couldn't find a picture of him sitting in front of the laptop. So I was really happy. Just wanted to share that with you. All right, we're on our last section here. Got about 20 minutes to knock it out. I think we can do it. Triple H.
Here comes
talent,
the game.
Recruitment, globalization. Everybody having a good time? All right. And then he says, as you heard from day one, WWE has always been about reimagining the brand, having the vision and then taking the steps to get there. To that foresight to reimagine is what made WWE the global phenomenon we are today. And then he did some graphs. He did some charts. He did some
very
graphics
interesting
here.
maps in this presentation.
Yeah, so he said, as we achieved national and worldwide success, the regional territory promotions disappeared, and they had four promotions. There was WWE, of course, as it was called always, never was called anything else. You had a company called WCW that was out of the Carolinas and Georgia. You had what looks to probably be World-Class Championship Wrestling down in Texas, and then you have AWA's logo up in oddly enough, they put it in North Dakota for some reason.
Well, I don't know why it's covering the entire blue region here.
It is blue. Yes, it is blue, but it's just funny where
it's covering
like Georgia,
Colorado, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and in the upper Illinois area, and a little bit of.
It's just very odd.
What is this here? Alberta?
Winnipeg. Yeah. Due north of it. I'm sorry, no, Manitoba. Okay. That's Manitoba. That is,
Sorry to our Canadian listeners.
My apologies to the Canadian listeners. The next graph is just all of the U.S. and is red and just says WWE. And he said, without these territory promotions, there became no pathway for new talent to reach WWE. There was no place for them to develop characters, hone their skills in front of a live audience, and most importantly, no place for them to prepare for the massive TV and digital platform that WWE superstars perform on.
Let me know when you're ready.
Do you want to comment? Would you like to say anything about this, or do you want me to finish this? I feel like that's a good
let's stop right there.
So, were you aware that we are out of ways to bring anyone into wrestling now because there's no regional territories, and that there was only 4 regional territories before in the world, and they're gone?
So my earlier rant about Stephanie McMahon's presentation was mostly focused on Vince McMahon, and I think Paul Levesque has a much more forward-thinking philosophy and vision for pro wrestling that I think largely, as we talked about in at least one other show, that I think largely changed in a positive way in 2014. His philosophy on talent and what kind of talent he could bring into WWE and what kind of stars he could make, and especially how he would treat the NXT brand changed in a big way in late 2014 or so, around the time that they brought in Hideo Itami, Finn Balor, and Kevin Owens. But here what he's saying is a complete lie, and he's telling it to people who are not in a position to really know any better. And again, he said that as WWE dominated the world, just to paraphrase, the regional territories disappeared, which is kind of a narrative that especially a previous generation of wrestling wisdom would tell you, is that, without the territories, there's really no way to cultivate the talent, to get people the experience to, come into WWE and become big stars and things like that, which there is a shred of truth to. There's some truth to, all right, that back in the day, there were territories and people could jump around and they could work in this territory for a while, work with all these people with this sort of audience, and then after a year or two, they might jump to another territory and get a whole different selection of experience, and so on and so on.
And that people could get to the very top of a territory sometime within a year or 2 years or 3 years of starting in the business. Like, there's lots of examples of guys who were pretty fresh to the business who ended up being big stars in territories very early on in their careers. Not you got to work your way up for 10 years type thing.
In effect, what I see Paul Levesque doing here is he's basically taking credit for an entire independent wrestling phenomenon that has emerged since about the year 2002, which is about the year that WWE completed its domination of the world after WCW and ECW went out of business. And of course, he's not going to talk about that, right? I shouldn't be surprised that he's not going to talk about independent wrestling in front of WWE business partners. Nonetheless, I don't think he should be telling such a lie to people that, again, are in no position to know any better, or in no position to really understand how the wrestling industry really works and has really changed and evolved, if you will, through the last 15, 17 years or so.
And my whole thought when I saw this was just like, there's all I want to do. It's one of these where I'm so short-term obsessive on this stuff, where I was like, I want to stop covering the BPS and I want to go back and I want to do my 20-year where did all the new people come from, and talk about where did you get these 10 big stars that were in your company? Where did you get Daniel Bryan from? Where did you get CM Punk from? Where did you get this Rey Mysterio from? Where did you get
Nakamura from? Where did you get Asuka from?
And I even started with the people that are pre-PC, right? And then you get to the PC people and you're like, wait a second, are you trying to tell me that Nakamura came from your PC that Asuka came from your PC. Like, it's so ridiculous to pretend that someone who is that well connected and performed that well on their very first match could possibly need all of this additional training and that your PC is providing that. And on top of that, the idea of being, okay, even if your PC provides that, they're providing a polishing service. They're not providing a training service. There's a big difference between taking someone. And so we talked about it before about, like, can we come up with those examples of people that literally started as coal and ended up as diamonds that were not from wrestling. And you could say, yeah, Chad Gable learned a lot. Alexa Bliss learned a lot. Charlotte Flair learned a lot. And so there are examples of people that have made their way through the system and become professional wrestlers. Roman Reigns. But there's a lot of examples of people like a Johnny Gargano or a Almas or a Nakamura or something where you'd be like, oh no, they learned or Dean Ambrose, and be like, they learned their skills all over the world. And the PC could have polished them, which is perfectly fine. There's no shame in that, of being able to say you do have to in some way become bigger and working with the best people in the world. If Shawn Michaels gets to be your mentor, I bet you that's going to help a lot of these people out becoming better wrestlers. But there's a lot to be said about, like, pretending that AJ Styles, I thought it was even funny that the next picture is a picture of AJ Styles. And I'll be like, yeah, exactly. I'd be like, you mean the guy that literally worked for your competition for almost his whole life and then went to Japan, and then you guys finally gave him a big money offer and he came in and dominated? And
what I think he's doing here, he's taking credit for the entire independent wrestling phenomenon that has exploded since 2002. And again, I think this is all kind of related to, in a way, what I was talking about earlier, in that, I don't know, maybe I talk about this sometimes, that there's a demand for pro wrestling that is not just what WWE delivers or what WWE provides. WWE just happens to be the overwhelmingly dominant and most powerful and richest brand of pro wrestling that there is. The economic demand for pro wrestling, not just WWE, was strong enough in 2002 after WCW and ECW went out of business that on the wings of new media,
on the wings of new media.
Next headline. But they were able to, and I think this has happened throughout wrestling history, right? The pro wrestling is often one of the first things, one of the first businesses or industries to take hold of new media and try to do something with it. And with that new media, through the internet or through social media or through smartphones becoming more ubiquitous, all these other brands were able to emerge and gain worldwide and even American followings, whether that's Ring of Honor, New Japan, or super indies like Evolve and PWG and a lot of others that are, I think, growing more influential and more profitable every day.
And to me, this would be where, if I was doing digital and social media for WWE, this would be more my narrative is not esports is the future. I'd be like, look at what has happened with successful professional wrestling, creation and expansion and exposure and penetration in the marketplace in the last 15 years, and what drove that, and what were the keys to making that successful, and OTT services and all this other stuff. Like, to me, there's such a bigger story to me to be like, we should own Pivot Share, or we should own, Click Wrestling or something, like we should be buying up all the other professional wrestling OTT services and just putting them under our banner now, because it's an easy land grab for us, as opposed to being like League of Legends can sell at the Staples Center. Be like, what does that have to do with anything?
This feels like the festering of a remaining resentment for independent wrestling that was even more pronounced in 2013 and years before, when there's stories of things like CM Punk being made fun of because he's an indie guy, and people not really taking people's experience from independent wrestling seriously. And although we have heard Triple H on his conference calls before NXT takeovers say things like the independent undercurrent of pro wrestling is so valuable and so essential, he doesn't say anything approaching that here, because I think he knows he's in front of an audience that he can get away with that in front of. And when he's talking to the wrestling media on his conference calls, he knows he can't get away with that, and he has to sculpt that message in a way that is more digestible for that audience. But here he is taking credit or at least washing over the fact that independent wrestling has become not
a phenomenon of its own, as he would say.
It's become not exactly like the territory system, because the territory promotions drew bigger crowds and they had bigger television audiences, traditional television audiences certainly, but they were able to run, some of them like Memphis were able to run on a weekly basis, and most independent wrestling promotions run on like a monthly basis, if that. Although there are some that are starting to carve out more of a regional territory where they're able to run multiple times a month. But it's becoming something approaching what the territories did, and it's becoming an entire world where people can get experience that can make them a hell of a lot more ready for pro wrestling than the people they sign as, former NFL players who are prospects that they bring into the Performance Center and train. And so far, since July 2013, when the Performance Center was opened, the people who have that experience from an independent wrestling background, if not just because of the experience that they gained as wrestlers, as workers on the indies, that plus some recognition that they have among a fan base that watches NXT was able to help them become stars at a far more efficient rate than athletic prospects or fitness model prospects or whatever.
They mentioned 1.1 million subscribers viewing NXT. We don't really know what that means. They just said that. So,
and for Triple H to make this presentation the way he does is a lie. He's taking credit for something that he didn't do at all, and he's telling a very manipulated and untruthful version of the story here.
I hold back from calling it a straight up lie, because I would say the PC has positively affected the development of indie wrestling in the sense that NXT is not only, like they mentioned here, 220 people. And I don't know whether that includes the main roster superstars. I think it does. But almost half that number is probably NXT
when he says,
talent.
Without the territory promotions, there became no pathway for new talent to reach WWE.
Oh,
That's a lie.
Yes. No. Okay, yes. The opening of his, the as usual, WWE's history is sometimes in stark contrast to
there was no
reality.
place for talented
usually the
characters
opposite.
hone their skills in front of a live audience. That's a lie.
Yes, no, that's a straight up lie. I would just say that I think his contribution to it all is by making NXT a valuable brand for WWE. He also, I think, helped build up part of the independent wrestling ecosystem.
As I argued, because
I do think
he legitimized that pathway even more, because he was able to recognize that these folks who didn't come from my Performance Center or my OVW or my Deep South system, I can actually have talent, even though they already had talent for years and years. He just started to acknowledge it.
And he created a system where fans were reacting positively to it, so you could prove it's working. Like Vince always says, I have or Stephanie, I have the test audience every night. What are they doing?
A brand that allowed him to take credit for it.
But like the fact that there's people in the PC that I don't think we would have ever expected to be in WWE. Both as trainers and as like Chris Hero or
people
something.
Who should be there, but we didn't expect to be there because of their antiquated philosophy.
Yeah. And so I think he does deserve some credit for basically saying NXT. I created a version that did start changing people's minds higher up in WWE.
Yeah. And I would speculate.
I mean, he made a joke here. He makes a joke at one point where he's like, suddenly all my talent got called up. Thanks, Vince. When he's talking about Raw and SmackDown, about how he had to now come up with a way to basically create another pipeline for a pipeline, right? So the big takeaway here, and I'm rushing just because I have only a few minutes left here. I have to curl. Is his global localization thing, which, as he points out, he did trademark. Don't try to take it. And so global localization, TM, is basically not only him saying, hey, we're going to do more with the UK, and we're going back on June 18th and 19th to the Royal Albert Hall, and we're going to do the Greatest Royal Rumble in Jeddah, and we're doing tryouts. But in fact, we are now going to start setting up as he says, we have a 10-year strategic multi-platform partnership with the Saudi General Sports Authority that includes localized tryouts, training, possible on-the-ground performance, and even a Middle Eastern brand. And yes, for Middle Eastern brand, they showed 2 pictures. One is a bunch of women doing kettlebell squats, and the second one is like Ember Moon doing a big splash on people. At the same time he was saying that. And then he's like, imagine the engagement when a kid in Riyadh or Dubai and Jakarta can grow up as a WWE fan, be recruited by us, be trained in the WWE, become a champion in their home country, go on to compete globally in NXT, debut on Raw or SmackDown, and one day step to a sold-out stadium in the grandest stage of them all. And the person that they show doing all of this is Jinder Mahal. Where they showed Jinder Mahal working out, and then Jinder Mahal in NXT, and then Jinder Mahal beating Yoshitatsu on SmackDown, and then Jinder Mahal in WrestleMania. And so it's just one of those where you're like, wow, there's a lot to unpack there, because Jinder Mahal is a Canadian. He's a Canadian whose uncle was a big star in the business. You know, like, he's a Canadian with a very specific physique who was treated as a jobber for years and years and years. And so this says a lot about, you know, kind of you're pretending like this is an Indian kid that you're bringing into your home market, but this is very different than what really happened.
Very specific physique. I like that phrase. So specific, it appears to be covered in acne and gynecomastia, but yeah.
So he was saying our supply is limited by our geography. So I want to set up. And so he shows this picture here where you have NXT at the Performance Center in Orlando. Then you have NXT on South America. You have NXT on Europe. You have NXT in the Middle East. You have NXT in India, and you have NXT in China. And ironically enough, because of the graphics that they used, I think Iceland also gets highlighted there. So maybe we'll have NXT where you can also have a lot of Icelandic stars. But he's just basically saying it's the same grassroots territory feeder system that existed before, except for not on a national level, on a global level, and all under the W banner. And then he starts trying to talk about like people that are debuting, you know, as global people. So he talks about Shadi Obezo. He talks about Kavita Devi. He talks about Teen Bang and Raku Singh. And yes, they do misspell one of their own signees' name on the slide. As I noticed, Shadi Obezo's name is misspelled. Yes. And I was just like, come on, guys. Like, if you're going to brag about it, it takes 2 seconds to Wikipedia it. They talk about the NFL players like Baron Corbin, or Olympians like Chad Gable, or American Ninja Warrior, Casey Cesano, you know, just all these things. And then they go into Ronda. But it's funny with this because I had some people react negatively on Facebook and Twitter when they heard about this, where they're just like, WWE is going to dominate. And the 2 things that came up is, number 1, this was Shane McMahon's plan 10 years ago to do this same thing. Number 2, I would say, or Shane McMahon and other people in international. I don't think it should just be counted as Shane McMahon's plan. There's a lot of executives in international, a very different team, kind of like the pre-Barrios team. And then the other half of this is that, like, I think it's great. I think this is exactly what you want to do. Is I do think they should have NXT that's regional, because I do think that there'd be a way to keep people fresh and do it. But as I also pointed out to you, we could have NXT in the U.S. We don't have to have only one promotion in the U.S. Now, I agree we can't do like major touring all over the U.S. It's been proven in Florida. It's very tough to keep that one going. But like, there is something to be said for, like, we have more culture than just Florida in this world.
That's for sure.
But yeah. So they get in here, they have Ronda come in and talk, and like I said, she gives him a hug, and they go on, and then they announce Cricket Wireless is the big.
Flips him right on the floor.
I know. See, that would have been amazing. Would have been amazing taking a bump there, and I would have loved it. Alrighty. Well, unfortunately, I need to get running to my curling class. I will be recording some more with Mr. Brandon Howard Thurston very soon here. But in the meanwhile, what is happening here is I will just let everyone know that Wrestlenomics Radio is always available through our friends at the Voices of Wrestling, through our Audio Boom hosts, and Wrestlenomics Radio has a Patreon, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. And what I also will plug is that I've got some auctions going up here for charity. So if you live in the Twin Cities, there's an opportunity to play the board game Dune with me, or there's an opportunity to watch the Laserdisc of Dune with me. So I have 2 Dune-based auction opportunities that I'll be tweeting about. So
it's an esports experience that can be monetized.
It's an esports. That is true. So Brandon will probably edit in here lots of awesome things like Elias's song, and then of course another 20-minute rant at some point here. because I think I cut him off. I think he had a lot more juice left in the
maybe some labor complaints,
there.
But that's the gist of it. I got my spots in.
Yeah, like I posted something yesterday on Twitter, and with all the talk here about the Greatest Royal Rumble, my one line here was my tweet earlier. To never forget that WWE views their talent as independent contractors and not employees. They can say it's a family, but they're a renewable resource. And that, to me, is the fundamental thing to always keep in mind, is that WWE views this talent like a resource, like oil or like electricity, or they are not being viewed as like valued members of their family that they're trying to bring in. And the more you try to think of it as a family, you're going to be frustrated. The more you think of it as a business where they don't view these people as employees, but rather as just a resource, like computers or desks, it makes a lot more sense. And I was quoting from a lawsuit that they did in the Titus O'Neil case, but it's just really funny where they go through the whole thing basically saying, well, Swerved did do an agreement with us. They were supposed to plan things out. They didn't get permission to do a skit. And then the very last point, they just say WWE talent, including Mr. Bullard and Ms. Beavis, are independent contractors and not employees. And it's just like, yes, don't ever, ever forget that. All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.